What the fuck is up, world? Piali, Tlaltic back. We back in this bitch. Another podcast for that ass. Another Grito, sea dicho. Coming about 2 months since the previous episode of the podcast. And I hope the 3 hours that it was worth was enough to tide you over until this one. I know I said I was going to do it every month, but bro, you know what it is, dog. Life happens, man. I'm trying to, I'm just low riding through Turtle Island, homie, pumping these bitches out when I can, right? If it makes you feel any better, this is another 3-hour episode, right? So hopefully it's not going to take 2 months to get it back around to the next follow-up, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about this one for now. And not worried per se, like, oh my God, I hope it's good. I know it's good, dog. You know your boy always brings the motherfucking heat. I didn't just spend 2 months in reflection just to come back and drop some bullshit on you. Nah, dog, that's not how it works, okay? I'm saying I hope it's good in the sense that you take from it what you need and that in turn you respond with me or with others for, the thoughts I should state rather, that it inspires hopefully within you. That's what I mean when I say that hopefully it's good, right? Again, as I've mentioned before, this is never meant to be a one-way dialogue. This is a two-way street, homie. And even though I'm the only motherfucker up in this lonely-ass room talking to myself at the moment, I know that there's at least one of you out there listening. And I hope that it inspires you to reach out to your boy and be like, yo, Ice, that last episode of the podcast, shit fucking sucked, bro, and here's why. Or, yo, Ice, that last episode of the podcast was pretty dope, dog, and here's why, right? Or you could say, I don't even listen to your podcast, bitch, but you're a fucking asshole, and I want you to let you know, like many people already do, right? On socials. Speaking of socials, if you haven't already, follow your boy, OG_IceNice13 on the gram. Something along the same lines of the other socials, but I don't really use them. You already know the deal, right? I tried to respond to some of the comments on YouTube. Shout out if you're watching on YouTube to you personally. And if you're not watching on YouTube, if you're just listening along, shout out to you too. Each and every single one of you that is listening to this. A special shout out to Miss Lindsay, of course, right, for listening. Let's see, dog. What else do I want to, who else who am I trying to, so I never write these shout outs down, bro. And I always have like a list of people in mind. And I hope you understand that I'm not like dissing you in any particular way for forgetting. I sincerely do appreciate every single one of you that do listen to these motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Oh well, I'm sorry. Okay, just shout out to every one of you that's listening to this, bro. Straight up, okay? Let's jump into it, man, because like I said, I have a lot that I would like to discuss. And I'm gonna try, it's gonna be long. So I'm just, let's just jump into it and, avoid the whole whatever, right? The whole elaborate introduction. One thing that I was noticing when I sat down to write this bitch, however, is that it does kind of have a theme. And the theme is learning to swim through the waters of life. If you look back here, I have a new painting, a couple of new paintings, right? And my flag is still over here. The huelga is still over here on this side now, right? But I have a couple of paintings over here from the codices. And one of the paintings you'll notice, for those of you who are looking on the YouTubes, is of Chalchiuhtlicue, right? For those of you who aren't looking on YouTube, you can look it up, right? Chalchiuhtlicue is the mother of life, essentially. And underneath her, she has water. And this podcast, I started writing it about a month ago, and I barely got this painting. But it's not like I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to write a podcast about this painting. Nah, that's just, when I ordered this painting, it was around the same time as where it was when I started initially writing this podcast, and that was learning what it truly means to be swimming through the waters of life, right? Not on this one, not on this painting, you can't see it. But for those of you who are, watching on YouTube, inevitably rather, I will pull up another picture of Chalchiuhtlicue where we can see people, the masculine more directly, the masculine and feminine energies that exist within all of us who are swimming through life. And in the process of swimming through life, you will notice that they're, doing certain things. Because as dope as these paintings are in the background, dog, the fact of the matter is they're not even really paintings. They're books, and they tell stories, dog. Like, that's a whole philosophy right here, just Chalchiuhtlicue, right? That the other one that I'm pointing to, the one next to it is Tonatiuh. That's a whole philosophy right there. The two underneath it, Mictecasihuatl and Mictlantecuhtli, right? Those are whole philosophies right there, dog. So, the idea here is, in terms of this particular episode of the podcast, when it comes to the shit that I'm going to be discussing, it was like heavily influenced by this philosophy that I'm learning, the ancestral element, right? And more directly with more personal shit that I got going on, which is what I wanted to actually start the podcast with talking about today. For those of you who listened to the previous episode when I was discussing my, type O negative fixation, one of the things that I mentioned is that there was a particular reason why I was so heavily, enmeshed in the waters, if you will, to maintain the metaphor of type O negative. And that is because of some personal shit that I had going on in my life. And at the time, I wasn't really ready to talk about it. Not because I was trying to be like secretive or whatever, but because I hadn't fleshed out, I hadn't fully polished my ideas, my thoughts, and my emotions of how it is that I felt about what it was that I was going through at that time. And because of that, I didn't want to speak out of pocket, bro. It's very easy. It would have been very easy for me to come on here and say a lot of very angry, hateful things. And, I'm not saying that I wasn't entitled to feel that way, so much that it wasn't necessarily how I actually really felt. Again, for those of you who have, followed along this podcast enough, you'll know like a couple episodes ago how I mentioned that one of the things that I have a very difficult time with is people expecting you to, state how you feel right now and hold you accountable to that. Because nah, dog, my thoughts are our thoughts. It's not just me. Our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, they're fleeting. They're not fleeting per se, but they're in constant flux. And you could very well be saying what you feel and what you mean at that particular moment. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to, that it very rarely do those emotions, stick in that exact same emotional state as the one that it is that, you were asked to state your opinion at that particular time. So in this particular case, I didn't want to get on this podcast and talk to you about my breakup. Okay. So, after a total of 15 years, right? 16 years that I've known her, my now ex-girlfriend and I broke up recently, a couple of months back. And that was the whole, that's the situatedness that from which you can, if you want to, go back and listen to at least that element of the podcast, the type O negative, and understand why it is that I was there in that particular place, right? And why I didn't want to just jump on this bitch in the first place and talk just recklessly, essentially, about it. Because while I was initially upset, I mean, why wouldn't I be? We were together for 15 years, bro. It wouldn't have been accurate. It's not an accurate reflection of my emotional state. And it certainly isn't, absolutely not an accurate representation of my thoughts about my now ex-girlfriend, my baby mama number 2, right? Because she really is the shit, dog. Like it is what it is. Why beat around the bush? Like she's literally my second baby mama. For those of you, if you didn't know, I got 2 baby mamas, right? But when I call her baby mama number 2, like I'm really meaning like she's the shit, dog, right? And I didn't want to come on here and talk ill on her because we had broken up and I was upset, because despite my anger and frustration with the situation at the moment, she is and will always be a very important part of my life, dog. It's actually pretty funny because it definitely happened the first time we broke up, because we've broken up before, but this time is not like the first time we broke up. The first time we broke up, it was like, oh, there's going to be hope that we'll get back together, on my end at least, right? She was at the time completely convinced that it was over. I had always maintained hope the first time that we got back together that we'd get back together. The first time that we broke up, rather, that we would end up back together. And we did about a year later, right? This time is not like the last time, just so we're clear. At least not immediately. Maybe one day far down the road, but for reasons that I'll talk about here shortly, why it's not going to happen anytime soon. But the same thing is happening again in terms of people who are looking at us and be like, you guys will get back together soon enough. And a lot of it has to do because, even the first time we broke up, but now, especially now, we're cool. Like everything's like, we're good. We're on speaking terms now, which for me personally, it really means a lot, dog. When I dropped that last podcast, I hadn't spoken to her in 2 months, bro, which was, it kind of fucked me up. I'm not going to lie. Cause from the moment I met her, that's the longest it's been since I had never spoken to her, since I hadn't spoken to her. 2 months was like the longest ever. Right. Even after our initial breakup. And, when I recorded that last episode, I was like in a really weird place because of it. Because bro, like That's my life partner, man. Even though we're not together, like the shit that we've been through is things that you can't undo. It's funny, like just thinking about a future relationship. I have no interest in ever being in a relationship again. I've expressed this much to my ex. None at all whatsoever. I personally think relationships are stupid as fuck. Colonial relationships. Let me be very clear about that. I think our colonized understanding of love and relationships, and I'm going to talk about it here in detail shortly, but I think relationships are dumb, and I have zero interest in ever being in one again, right? And just the thought of having to like explain my relationship to my ex, right, my baby mama number 2, to another person, another woman, it makes me laugh. Like I'm not gonna explain it, dog. Like if you come to me as a person who seeks to enter into my life, expecting for me to just pretend like this person that was a part of my life for 15 years didn't exist, you're an idiot. And you clearly have no respect or appreciation for me. And you don't want my affection and my attention as an individual person. You want this person that you want to emulate and formulate into the image of what you expect the relationship to be. In which case I have no interest and definitely zero desire of trying to appease another person and fit into what they, consider worthy of a partner. This is just not an interest in mine, right? And furthermore, like in regards to the respect element, it's like, bro, you got to understand this person. And it's not just me, man. It's not just me. I hope that I've made this particular point clear throughout the entirety of this podcast duration. Whenever I'm speaking on shit, like I'm speaking on my own personal experience, but I hope that you understand. And if you don't, let me please express this now, because the last thing I want you to do is think that this is some sort of narcissistic project where I'm just coming here to vent my own personal, diatribe on my own life or whatever. Like, no, I'm hoping that you find some sort of, something that reverberates enough with you to take away a bit of the knowledge and wisdom that I have picked up myself personally from the experiences of life that I've had. In this particular case, the breakup, right? So in this instance, then the idea of having to even explain to another person that, I have this person in my life who we essentially grew up together, dog. Literally. We both met at a very young age. And when we both met, we were young, bro. And we were heavily, heavily codependent, like both of us, on one another, especially, right? And from the moment we first met, like, we were inseparable, dog. We grew up together, basically. Okay, I'm fucking almost 40 now. She was there with me throughout the entirety of my 20s and almost all of my 30s. Still now, like, you know what I mean? So, a lot of life happens between that, bro. A lot of really intimate moments, a lot of sad moments, a lot of happy moments, and things that you can't just, as easy, or rather not as easy, but as much as we wish that we could just wish away the pain of a breakup, doing so would imply that we would have to necessarily forget what it is that caused the pain in the first place. The pain doesn't come, I feel, from the actual breakup itself, but rather from the understanding that all those precious moments that you once shared with this person, they're no longer going to be a part of your life moving forward. At least not with that person. Speak of the devil. That was her right there, right? Anyways, I completely lost my fucking train of thought speaking to her. But the basic point is, like, yeah, dog, we grew up together. We went through a lot together. When my brother died, she was the first person I called. The next day, all I did was fucking lay my head in her lap and just cry, essentially. Not like tears. I never have tears for whatever reason, right? I'm broken, I guess. The tear duct, or maybe just me as a person. But what I mean is, like, I just laid there essentially, literally all day in her lap, woe is I type shit, because my brother literally just died fucking, 10 hours ago. Right? When our daughter was born, bro, like I was there holding her hand the entire time through all sorts of life experiences, both good and bad. She was there. You know what I'm saying? And to ever expect another person to just okay. So that was a train of thought here. That's sad, bro. It's like, that's not going to be her moving forward for the most part. Again, you know what I mean? Like, she'll still be there because we're cool now. We've come to a point where we can co-parent our daughter together and where we can communicate as friends. It's not my friend, it's my life partner, bro. And it's not that I hate saying it, because I don't give a fuck what you think, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way, just so we're clear. But if you're like a chick listening to this and you're like, oh, I knew he's hung up on his ex, just know, bitch, I can give a fuck less what you think. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm trying to state. You know what I mean? And it's not a knock on you either. You know what I mean? It's just like, that's what I'm trying to state, is that I have no interest for a relationship ever again. If a woman, why do I keep saying person, like a woman, can't, respect the fact that I have this important person in my life moving forward, I have zero interest in having them in my life at all whatsoever. You know what I mean? There's no room for you, bro. And this idea that I'm doing that because I'm hung up on my ex, like, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. It's not because I'm hung up on my ex, dog. She's living her own life. She's doing her own thing. I am happy that she's happy, which is what I'm going to talk about here shortly, right? But it's got everything to do with the limited way in which you view just reality in general, bro, but definitely absolutely relationships. And specifically in terms of how that is going to affect our interaction moving forward, because beyond not having a desire to explain away to people why this person, my ex, is so important to my life, I absolutely have no desire in trying to shape myself to be something that another person, again, values in a partner or wants from a partner. Like, if you want somebody that you can shape and mold, there are plenty of people out there who will, gladly fit the part for most women. You know what I mean? I'm not one of them. And I'm honestly glad that I can say that so openly and confidently now at this point in my life, because one thing that, okay, so here's the learning to swim in the waters part, like explicitly stated, at least for this section right here. One thing that I've really come to learn about myself following this breakup is how dependent I have always been on women in my life, right? I'm going to get like really into detail with this in a little bit. So I'm not trying to be like purposely vague, but the idea for now is simply summated as that prior to my ex, my now recent ex, I had another ex, dog, my first baby mama. And I met her when I was 17, and I married her, dog, like straight up. We got married and we had a kid, and we got divorced at 22. I met my second baby mama like a year later. No, I got divorced to her at 21 because I met my most recent baby mama at 22. So literally like a year and some change, maybe 2 years went by. So we got divorced. I don't know, man. It wasn't that long. Okay. It wasn't like that fast, but it wasn't that long either. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that timeline wise, I came to understand how dependent I've always been on women in my life. Because even when my first baby mama and I split up, there was no I didn't take any time to myself. And at the time, I thought that doing so was ridiculous. Like, why the fuck am I going to take any time to work on myself? I'm just going to go fuck as many bitches as I can. Straight up, that's me at 21. Nah, younger. No, yeah, 21. I don't know, man. Fuck, my math is off. I don't know. I'm 38 now. That's all I know, right? But yeah, when my first baby mama and I broke up, that was literally straight up my first thought. I was a young dude, and I had no coping mechanisms. I had realistically no positive male influence in my life to, try to guide me otherwise. So when I first broke up with my first baby mama, that's all I was thinking about. I'm gonna get laid, right? How do you get over someone else? You get on top of as many people as you can in between them. You know what I'm saying? And so the point here being is that from that woman, the first one that I had a baby with, till my second baby mom, there was no break. It was just like a constant flow of women, just like nonstop. Like as many as I could pile up, it doesn't matter. All I would think about is trying to fuck as many women as I possibly could. That's all I would ever think about as a kid, right? And then I met this chick, my second baby mama, and I was, committed to her until we broke up the first time. And then the same shit, like I'm just going to try to get as many fucking women in my life as possible in order to try to get over this woman here. But I never got over her. Like I mentioned earlier, I had always maintained hope that we'd get back together, and we did. And once again, I remained committed and faithful to her. But when we broke up about 6 months ago, right? I really, really, really had to sit down and ask myself, all right, dog, what's the next move? And before I could even decide the next move, I had to first understand where I was as a person in the first place. And where I was, it fortunately, obviously, as I already mentioned in the previous episode of the podcast, is not where I was when I was 21. That's for sure, right? So I had to ask myself, more importantly, why? Why was I there in the first place? And the answer is because there is a longing within, I think, not just me, but many of us who have been disconnected from our matrilineal, matriarchal societies for the divine, honestly, I'm not trying to sound hyperbolic, but straight up the divine feminine energy in our lives. Again, I'm not trying to sound hyperbolic. I'm being honest, bro. One of the things about this Western Christian society is obviously it's very phallocentric. It's very patriarchal, to use that language. And, maybe European people are cool with that because that's their genetic lineage. But me personally, I'm telling you straight up, dog, no. For sure, I'm telling you straight up, no. And I'm sure I'm not the only one because we don't come from patriarchal societies, dog. We come from matriarchal societies. And we are Tloque Nahuatl, dog. We are the close and the far, meaning that I am my ancestors. Literally, their blood flows through my veins right now. The legacy that I have inherited, the knowledge that I've inherited, it all comes from their genetics, bro. And memory is passed through those genetics as well. And the memory of the, cultures that we lived in is very much contained within my genetics and probably your genetics too, right? I don't want to say probably, for sure, regardless of who your ancestors are, right? But I'm saying probably in the sense that if you're like, of quote unquote Mesoamerican descent like I am, right? And because of that, being ripped away from this, it has like a very severe psychological impact that I don't think gets enough attention as it really deserves. I've done a whole episode on the labyrinth of solitude, which kind of talks about that when he's speaking about los hijos de la chingada, right? Being ripped away from our indigenous roots and abandoned by the Christian father in the form of the Spaniard. So like this, I'm not just like making this shit up. And even if I was, I don't give a fuck. I don't need to justify my ideas through anybody else. I'm just saying like, it's there. People are talking about this. You know what I mean? And this is one of the things that I really came to realize after this most recent breakup is that I've always craved the feminine energy in my life. And unfortunately, especially as a young kid, the only way I knew how to express that was through fucking women. Like that's the only way that I knew how to do it. I had no other knowledge of it. You know what I'm saying? But now, as I've gotten a little bit older, I've come to understand and I've come to realize that that's fun. Don't get me wrong. But there's more to that relationship than me are not giving yourself, the ability to understand because you keep limiting yourself. This, again, goes back to the swimming in the waters of life. Breakups are hard, bro. They're fucking hard, man. I don't have to be the one to tell you. I'm sure you've gone through your own, okay? And again, going back to just because this is me relaying my personal experience in the hope that you relate. But, one of the ways that we're told to get through a breakup beyond the one that I just mentioned earlier is like, you want to get over someone, get underneath as many people as possible or get on top of as many people as possible. Like, yeah, okay, that's one way that we're told to do it in this Western society. Another way that we're told to do so is by burying ourselves in drugs and alcohol. You know what I mean? Distracting ourselves mindlessly with shit like work or menial tasks, social media, whatever it is. Not to get over the breakup in the relationship, but to distract yourself and to numb ourselves from the pain that not having that person in our life, causes. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm fucking perfectly navigating this current breakup. One of the things that I intended when I came to the realization of what it was that was causing me to cycle through this pattern of, philandering essentially, was one of the things that I came to realize was my reliance on alcohol, for instance, right? So I made to navigate not just breakups, but life in general. Pathetic now that I think about it, right? It's pathetic, dog, because, one of the things that I came to realize, one of the things that really fucked with me when I was going through this process of learning this, I guess, was there was this moment where after my brother died, I just drank every day, dog. Literally every day. I'm not being hyperbolic. I genuinely mean I was drunk every single day for about a year straight. And it hit me hard twice. The first time that it hit me hard, the realization of how fucked up this cycle that I was on of trying to drink the pain of my brother's loss away was when my grandmother brought it to my attention. Cause my grandmother, dog, she's a different person, bro. My grandfather, different people, dog. Just throwbacks to a different time. They navigated it without a single drop of alcohol, bro. You know what I mean? So when my grandmother brought that shit to my attention, it made me feel like a weak bitch, honestly. You know what I mean? Like, she did it with love, but she did it in a way that's like, dude, you're better than this. You know, we're stronger than this. We come from a stronger stock than this. And burying yourself in alcohol is not going to be the answer to dealing with the pain of your brother's death, right? And the second instance was when one of my little nieces, she was like, don't you remember when I was bald? And I was straight up had no recollection of it at all whatsoever. And she's like, yeah, after Ivan died, I shaved my head off. And I was like, damn, what the fuck? I have no recollection of this at all whatsoever. So they pull up the pictures, they pull up the receipts, and yeah, sure enough, there she is, bald. And I'm there next to her. And it's just like, I have no recollection of that at all whatsoever. And that's fucking pathetic, dog. And it's sad for a lot of reasons, but not the point of this episode. The point of this episode is demonstrating how, because of those two things, I made a conscientious effort after this recent breakup to be like, you know what? I'm not going to drink this pain away. I'm going to sit with this motherfucker. You know what I mean? As much as I possibly can. And I'm not trying to front and say that I haven't not drank, because I've had a couple of days when I went off the rails. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to get drunk. You know what I mean? But for the most part, I've stayed sober, dog. And I've stayed committed to all the things that I said, like, I'm not going to do. I'm trying my absolute best to not I'm trying my absolute 100% best to not get caught up in the philandering cycle. I'm trying, right? To not get caught up in the drugs and the alcohol. You know what I mean? And it's been difficult. But one of the positive, like a huge positive that's that I've taken away from doing so is coming to realize again, the pleasures of swimming in the waters of life. In this case, the waters are torrential, bro. They're fucking treacherous. They're wave after wave after wave just crashing down. This is a breakup. They're hard. They're difficult. You go from having one life one day to a complete other life another day. A seemingly drop of a dime. You know what I mean? And trying to navigate it in such a way where, especially I'm not young, bro. I'm fucking almost 40. You know what I mean? It's been difficult, right? And the initial impulse naturally back then would have been to do all the things that I said that just now of how I used to deal with breakups. But, learning to not do that, as difficult as it's been, has been highly rewarding because it's revealed a lot of insights that absolutely would not have been possible had I done the former. Certainly the most impactful has been realizing how deeply I've been living in fear, just fear in general, dog, my entire life, right? It's straight up a survival mechanism at this point. And I realized that it's one that I adopted as a child in order to survive the environment that I grew up in. And in many ways, this coping mechanism, this survival mechanism is in a large way what contributed. It contributed a lot to my breakup. I'll leave it at that, right? And the reason why is because when shit gets tough, dog, always since youth, I've activated my Nahuatl, right? To use the ancestral language. We all have it, okay? But yeah, it's definitely been a default. And what I mean by that is, like a serpent, I withdraw and I isolate and I, very to myself, essentially, before I can, shed a new skin, even, if you will, in order to emerge different, whatever, right? But in this case, yeah, dog, whenever shit gets tough, I have a tendency to just isolate, because I know if no one else got me, dog, straight up, I got me. I don't give a fuck. I'm all I need. I can get through anything in life with myself alone, right? That's how I've, since childhood, bro, for whatever reason. There's no need to get into the specifics, at least not now, of what it was like, you know what I'm saying? But it was always safety in myself, right? So even now as an adult, yeah, dog, when shit gets tough, I'll just isolate and I'll just grit my teeth and get through shit. I don't give a fuck. And I'll cut everyone and everything off, dude. I don't need anyone or anything to distract me right now. I'm just focused on trying to get through this one particular thing. And once I get through it, all right, we can pick up back where we left off. You know what I'm saying? Which is cool to me, you know what I mean? But it could definitely have a damaging effect on other people, as I'm sure you can gather from the relationship. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes I feel bad that I'm like that, but other times I'm like, bro, I mean, I'm not making an excuse because I genuinely am trying to work through it. But even then, like, for what? You know what I mean? I'm not going to be in a relationship anymore. I have no one to work through it for. Maybe my daughter. That's about it. You know what I'm saying? But the point here is that when my brother died, that was my default, bro. Like, and I didn't even realize it. I literally didn't even realize it until, again, after this last breakup and starting to reflect on it. But I straight up resorted to isolationism in order to survive that breakup. So alcoholism and isolationism, not a good combination. Again, it was good for me, at least the latter, the isolationism, in terms of dealing with the grief, but not so much, in terms of being in a partner. I was just not a good partner anymore, basically. You know what I mean? You can't be present for someone in a relationship when you're off in your own world. And, following the breakup, I really came to understand just how alone I had made myself and my ex-girlfriend feel, dog. And that really fucked me up, bro, because again, going back to the shit that I was talking about earlier, we didn't break up out of hatred, dog. We broke up in order to not hate each other. And the reason we got to that point in the first place was because of how isolated I had become. I mean, there's other factors too. Like, no one's perfect, but I'm not gonna ever speak ill of my ex, dog. Like, ever. She's cool as fuck. I love her. You know what I mean? But me personally, I can tell you for a fact, my inclination towards isolation definitely created a lot of distance between the two of us. And, you can't do that in a relationship, dog. And I started to realize, especially towards the end, that just how much of an impact it was having on her. You know what I mean? And I didn't want her, I didn't want to put her through that anymore. I didn't want her to be alone. She doesn't deserve to be alone. She deserves to be loved. We all do. You know what I mean? She deserves to have a partner who's there, present and attending to her needs. We all do. And I just am not at that point in my life right now, dog. I just can't, because I have far too many of my own issues beyond just the death of my brother. I'm talking about childhood issues, bro. Fucking mommy issues, straight up, right? That I have to deal with before I could ever be with anybody in general. But I don't want to be with anybody like moving forward. You know what I mean? The only person I would consider being in a relationship with is my ex. But I'm telling you now, no, not because I don't want to, but because I don't want to ever put her in that position again, and the position of being lonely. And it's going to happen, not because I want to, but because I still have not addressed the issues that led to it in the first place, which, again, the isolationism, are the mommy issues that, the fear of abandonment that leads to the isolationism, the grief of my brother's death, etc. Right? So until all those issues are reconciled, there's just no way, because, again, I wouldn't want to subject her to unhappiness, because we don't come here to be unhappy, dog. Like, it is what it is. It's not, it is what it is. Let me be more clear here. Like, we don't come to this, like, dude, this life is fleeting, bro. That's one thing that, that's one thing that having death enter so prominently into your life, so tragically into your life, really, really brings into focus, bro. When I was younger, I was heavily versed into existential philosophy because of this macabre fascination with death. And now I look at that same philosophy as histrionic, bro. Like, you have these philosophers who are waxing poetically about the alleged meaning of life. It's the alleged meaning of life within the Christian world, for one, the Western Christian world. Let's be 100% clear. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, so just bookmark it for now. But more importantly, like, it's never really discussed in terms of, I feel this way because of the death of my loved one in Western tradition of philosophy and existentialism. It's always like this weird, individualistic, narcissistic philosophy. It's like, what's going to happen to the world when I die? What does this mean for me? Why was I even born in the first place? Like, it's just histrionic, bro. You know what I mean? And it's not until death enters into your life, the death of a loved one, that for me personally, that this really began to come into sharp focus. And that's not the only thing that happens when, you're dealing with grief. Again, I'm not trying to speak ill on my ex-girlfriend, dog, because she's an amazing person. But, we don't come, and we certainly aren't educated with the skills necessary to properly process grief. No one is in this Western fucking Christian world. All we're told is like, you're going to die and go to heaven and be with God. Like, dude, what? No, there's more to it than that, man. And we don't have the skills necessary to deal with that, right? So I'm not going to sit here and cast judgment on my ex for what she did or what she didn't do. You know what I mean? Because that would be wrong. It's not her fault, right? But what I will say is that having my brother die really put into sharp focus the fleeting ephemerality and preciousness of this moment right here, right now. And it really put into fucking sharp focus the importance of enjoying this moment as much as we possibly can. And this is not on some like hedonistic, oh, I'm going to go off and get drunk and do coke and fuck as many bitches or dudes every night as I possibly can nonsense. Like, nah, that is not what I'm talking about at all. Not even in the slightest. I've already said that this is not the correct way to go about living a life. I feel, right? You want to live that life? More power to you. I've lived that life and it did not bring me any happiness at all whatsoever, right? I'm speaking more of like some real introspective shadow work type insights that come to, that help us under a polishing of our precious stone that genuinely helps us understand just how precious this moment is and just how important it is to appreciate it and enjoy it. Again, swimming through the waters of life, enjoy the good and the bad. Not because you're, happy that bad shit is happening, but because you're thankful for the fact that you're even alive to be experiencing them in the first place. Okay. So when it comes to this breakup and my ex, it's like, no, man, I love her so much still to this day that I don't want her to be unhappy. I love her so much that I would want nothing more for her than to be happy, even if it's with someone else. Of course, I would have loved to have been the one that made her happy, but I wasn't. And I can't be right now because I'm not there. I have a lot of work that I need to do on myself before I can ever get to that position in the first place. And because I understand that her life is limited, it's fleeting, like I don't want her to waste it miserable and unhappy and not enjoying the brief time that she has here. I want her to be happy. And as painful as it was to, come to the conclusion that we needed to break up in order for that to happen, it was ultimately the correct decision to do. This colonial element of possession, dog, it's just so strange to me, bro, because how can you presume to own someone when we quite literally don't even own ourselves? And I'm not even speaking on some slave shit, homie, but on the real life understanding that this body that we occupy, it comes from the earth, bro. And the energy that activates and animates it, it comes from the sun. And both of those, right? The body and the energy that's activating it, they're beholden to this precious temporary moment that we're currently living in. And it's when that time is up, when our corn, not our corn, we are born with a corn seed, but when our yarn of life, this is what the ancestors tell us. We're all born with a corn kernel, right? The corn kernel is our potential, and the potential can manifest in a variety of different ways. The corn kernels all become corn, right? But some corn is better suited for tortillas. Some corn is better suited for pozole, etc., right? The whole point is, and I'm going to talk about this here shortly, but the whole point is trying to figure out what your potential, is, the corn that we have, what the potential is for that corn, and then work to make it so, right? In order to sow a better future for the future descendants. And then we have a yarn, a string of yarn, right? Not yarn, but like a thread, right? And that thread is the amount of time that we have on this earth, right? So that's the two things that we were born with. And no one knows how long their thread is, dog. We can find out what our corn is for, but the only way we know how long our thread was when it's over, right? And that's what I mean. It's like, we don't even own ourselves, dog. The Tlaltikpak, right? That's what owns our body, the earth, right? And when we die, our bodies all return back to the Tosenchan, which is 6 feet under in the Tlaltikpak, dog. The Tosenchan is our one collective home where our body goes. And our energy, it all goes back to the Tonatiuhi-chan, right? The house in the sun. That's where it all goes back to. You know what I mean? So again, this fleeting experience, bro, that should be treasured and enjoyed with the people that we, and the things even that we love. And, you definitely can't say you love someone if you're expecting them to reject the moments and the people in their lives that they truly treasure and that help shape them into the person that they are, the person that you met. You know what I mean? Whoever I meet moving forward in life is a direct extension of the effect that my ex-girlfriend has had on my life, dog. And to pretend that doesn't exist is ridiculous. You know what I mean? That's not love, homie. That's, again, attempting to cultivate a flower in the mold and idealization that a person desires, rather than loving the flower for its unique beauty. I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating because we're here now, that since childhood, my grandmother has always reminded me that people, women, she would say women, right? But for the sake of this episode, women are like flowers, and you have to learn to love their individual petals. You can't just take the petals that you don't like off the flower, because inevitably you won't have a flower in the first place. And more importantly, it's the petals of the flower that made you attracted to that person in the first place. You know what I mean? You gotta love the person for all their petals, bro. If this isn't you, cool. No worries. Like, that's me. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I have no interest in trying to pretend otherwise moving forward just to accommodate another relationship into my life, because obviously that person doesn't respect me enough to, you know, as the five petaled flower that I am, right? Makwili, Sochi Makwili, right? The 5-petaled flower, basically. And there's deep ancestral philosophy there, but I didn't prepare for it, and I don't know it off the top of my head, so I'll just leave it at that, right? But the basic idea is, I mentioned it before. 1, 2 are hands, are arms. 3, 4 are legs, and then 5 are head, right? We people are the 5-petaled flower. Anyways, this is something that younger me absolutely would have not had the ability to do. There's just no way that I was equipped to emotionally come to such an understanding, bro. Younger me would have been so caught up in the possession element of a relationship. Again, this is what I was talking about earlier, just so we're 100% clear, that if a future prospective partner, again, I have no interest in being in a relationship ever again, but you never know how life flows. You know what I'm saying? But I do know that if there was ever a prospective partner, the immediate turnoff to that relationship would be the possession element of it. You know what I mean? The colonial relationship element of it. The moment someone starts to get clingy and possessive, like, bro, at best, you can be just a side piece. You know what I mean? The side piece to my focus in life right now, because there will never be a main piece. You know what I'm saying? But you'll just be something there. You know what I mean? Someone that's there because you displayed this gross narcissistic trait of possession. And I just want nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? And this is what I'm talking about. Like, younger me would have been that person for sure. And I'm talking about like up until about maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Not really, maybe like 10 years ago, right? I would have been so caught up in the whole, you know, if I can't have you, no one will, jealousy type shit, regardless of how unhappy it made either one of us. There's this movie, bro. I forget the name of the movie, but it's got Scarlett Johansson and that one dude from the Mighty Ducks. I don't know his name, right? But what other movies does he come out in? Joseph Gordon? I don't know. He was in, I don't know what fucking movie. He was in fucking The Mighty Ducks, bro. Right? Anyways, maybe you'll remember the name of the movie as I'm explaining it. But in the movie, he plays this young little macho dude, you know, and he's got like a father who's just like a stereotypical Italian dude in New York. The dad is Tony Danza, you know, and I'll never forget Tony Danza no matter what, because, you know, for one, Angels in the Outfield is goated. But two, because of the band, the Tony Danza tap dance extravaganza. Like, that name is so fucking memorable that I'll never forget the name Tony Danza. Right? Anyways, Tony Danza's in that movie. And he plays the father to this dude. And this dude is learning how to be a man through his father, right? And his father is exemplifying these toxic masculine traits, toxic quote unquote masculine traits, right? Of what it is to be a father and be in a relationship and be a husband, etc. Right? And it's just like the typical, you know, macho dude, basically, right? You treat a woman like an object, you fucking have her serve, you know, tend to your every needs, whatever, right? So in this movie, this little dude, he's not little, he's like a grown man, or he's like in his 20s, and he's like, oh yeah, one thing about it, he's addicted to porn. Right? Anyways, I just remember that. Anyways, in the movie, he ends up meeting Scarlett Johansson, which obviously is a fucking babe, bro. She's gorgeous. You know what I mean? And he's, going through the whole process of courting her. And in that trajectory, it's going to end up with them being exactly like his mother and father, basically, right? Two very attractive people who grow up and older in life and have kids, regardless of how unhappy they really are, right? Because that's the societal expectation. But then he gets thrown a curveball where he meets an older woman. I forget the name of this woman. She's in Boogie Nights. She's the redhead, right? And they end up hooking up. And what happens is it comes to find out, spoiler alert if you don't want to, spoil the movie, but this is your chance to stop now. She had just recently lost her son and her husband in an accident or something like that, right? So like they form a really close bond. Now, to be fair, this woman herself is equally as stunning as Scarlett Johansson, right? But in real life, dog, so in the movie, it plays out that he ends up choosing the redhead over Scarlett Johansson. And that's why it's a movie, dog. Because in real life, it doesn't matter how miserable Scarlett Johansson, because in the movie, like she's making them miserable, right? And in real life, it doesn't matter how miserable Scarlett Johansson, a beautiful woman, would have made a man. Chances are they're gonna choose the beautiful woman over the emotional connection 9 times out of 10, right? And that was definitely me for a very long time. Okay. Where again, it doesn't matter how unhappy I am, I'm going to fucking grin and bear it because this is a possession element and you're fucking mine and no one else can have you. You know what I mean? Having lost my brother, however, I realized how precious and fleeting life is and how important it is to move with love and bravery and not with fear and hate. The possession element, that's fear and that's hatred. You know what I mean? Learning to let go, bravery and love. It's not been easy and it won't be easy. People always say like, oh, what about when you see her with someone else? It's going to happen. And I hope that she's happy when she does so. And realistically, that's just a part of the waters of life. It's just learning to navigate and swim the waters of life, right? And choosing to do so with bravery and with love and not with fear, dog. So in this case, it would be the fear of losing her, the fear of being alone, the fear of her finding happiness with someone else, the fear of me never finding happiness, the fear of me finding happiness with someone else too, the fear of her never finding happiness, just fear like all around. And again, it's just, I realized that fear, like, again, I'm speaking about me, but I hope this, relates to you. Not because I don't hope in the sense that I want you to be living in fear, but I hope that you're not living in fear. That's what I should say. But that if you are, I hope that it, resonates in such a way that gets you to reflect, as I did, that, just because we've existed in fear our entire life, that implies like a constant state of vigilance, which ensures survival or, safety, which is good. But we're not there anymore. Like for me personally, I'm not a kid anymore, bro. I'm not in that space where I needed to be hyper vigilant just to survive. And I realized that the fear of not being with my ex was an extension of that. Regardless of how unhappy we were, it was easier to live in fear than it was to, surf the waters of life, essentially. So the idea here then is that the fear is what's been keeping me specifically in that mindset and developing out of it. The mindset of being afraid of the waters of life. Okay. Which, is understandable because especially as we get older, dog, like life changes so fast and it just keeps changing nonstop. And, the fear, there's nothing we're going to do to stop the change. That's inevitable. We know that. But the fear, it doesn't help. It just makes us shrink away from the possibilities that could potentially be awaiting us. Like we think it's safe and we think that it's good because it's safe, but it might not be, dog. And the fear, it could potentially be keeping us from something far greater. I'm not necessarily talking about another relationship here because as I've already mentioned, I love my ex, dog. She's the mother of my daughter, right? And we have so many precious memories shared that quite literally they define the human experience, okay? And as I mentioned, because of that, she will always have a special place in my heart. But getting back with her would be moving in fear. right? Because it would imply safety. And this would be terrible. Again, not because feeling safe is bad. No, fuck no. A relationship, you should feel safe. You're supposed to feel safe in the relationship. It's the foundation. It's a foundational pillar of any healthy relationship, right? But it would be bad because, again, as I mentioned, I personally have not done the work necessary to be the partner that she deserves, which again would be a terrible thing because in doing so, I would just be wasting her time and I would be wasting my time. And the time is precious, as I've already mentioned, right? Because there's only so much time that we have on this earth, bro, on this slippery earth of Tlaltikpak. And if we're not enjoying it, if we're not appreciating it, then, you know, it's all for naught. It really, really is all for naught. And this is going to be like important here coming shortly. So we'll bookmark it for now, as that's going to be the section on ancestral philosophy that I discussed today. Like what it is that what is it that we are really here for? You know what I mean? But before we get there, let's just wrap up this little section real quick. And yeah, dog, that's where I'm at in my personal life, at least, which is naturally going to affect the philosophy that I share with you all. Just a twice divorced, near middle-aged dad. Trying, you know, my best to co-parent a teenage daughter who is growing up faster than I could ever have imagined or let alone was prepared for, homie. Anyways, dog, moving on. Beyond my own personal life, a lot has also happened in our community since the last episode. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, dog, is how immigration enforcement is just an extension of the settler colonial project that it is that I've been talking about through the entirety of this podcast. I have a whole episode on the Indian problem, which, you know, this would just be an extension of that. The quote unquote Indian problem being the European peoples trying to make sense of what to do with all the brown people on this planet while simultaneously trying to take as much of their land, of our land as possible, right? What was the problem? There's people occupying it, for one. For two, American citizenship. They didn't want to give us American citizenship because there's more of us, dog. And every day there's more of us being born, right? Here's the shit, bro. The replacement theory, or rather, white replacement is very real. And it's a good thing. We're outbreeding you. This has always been a brown continent, bro. Okay? We got set back a couple years, a couple centuries, but we're back on the come up. And there's nothing that they can do to be able to stop it, right? So what's happening then with the immigration is itself just a continuation of that, bro. It's a continuation of colonization, right? More directly, bro, straight up, it's terrorism. It's fucking European terrorism. Everything about our understanding of quote unquote border policy and immigration policy is just completely mistaken, bro. It's seen from a colonial European lens, more directly, right? And, you know, they're doing a good enough job of brainwashing enough of the peoples in our community to perpetuate this cycle. But inevitably, numbers wise, we're just going to keep, it's inevitable, bro, that this continent will once again be an indigenous continent. It always has been. It always will be, right? They've just had the force of law, essentially, of military might to, assert their order on the rest of us. But it's slipping slowly but surely. And part of that is going to imply the understanding that we have of these migration routes, for example, and of geopolitics, and of what it means to be a citizen and a person and all that kind of shit, right? Right now, we view it entirely through the brainwashed European lens. But as time continues to unfold, bro, it's going to change. It's already changing, and it's only going to continue to do so, right? It's shifting from the one peddled by the mainstream media that is clearly driven by hatred and fear, right? And, we're seeing the reactions of this fear, and they're varied, right? And most of them we're familiar with, right? But some of them are new, dog, and some of them are very concerning, like the Guantanamo Bay shit, because everyone's cheering for it now, but that's such a slippery slope. That's such a slippery, power to give to the United States government that has shown itself since its inception to be never worthy of any sort of, positive consideration of what it is their intentions are. Like, they've only ever shown themselves to be, a detrimental force to the existence of humanity, dog. Since its inception. It's founded on genocide, bro. Okay? meaning that you could be celebrating now that they're sending quote unquote illegals to Guantanamo Bay. But they're not going to stop there. They're going to continue going because they're terrified right now, straight up. This is some shit I'm going to talk about a little bit with the movie element, right? So I'll bookmark it for now, but I'll just explain to you quickly that they're afraid. They being the European colonial settlers, they're afraid. And it took me a really long time to understand this, right? But once I did, like, it's starting to make a lot of sense. And again, I'll explain it in further detail when I get to the movie section. But for now, just know that because they are afraid, they are giving up a lot of the foundational liberties that make the United States the country that it is. And the violation of the First Amendment is one of them. We see it happening already. They first started with the quote unquote illegal aliens, but now they're moving to citizens, people who are not citizens, but who are here legally. As in the case of the Palestinian advocate who is still in danger of being deported for exercising his First Amendment right. Prior to taking presidency, Donald Trump explicitly came out and made a giant speech about how the First Amendment is a foundational principle in the United States of America and that he's going to return it in its absolute form because free speech is necessary to have freedom. It's been 2 months, dog. And now suddenly free speech has its limits according to the Republican government that's currently in office. And because it has limits according to them, they are starting to deport people who don't agree with them, which already is demonstrating how dangerous of a slope, how dangerous it is to allow them this power in the first place. You could be celebrating it because you've been brainwashed and indoctrinated because of your European understanding of migration routes to hate immigrants. And the next thing you know, they're going to come after me. They're going to come after other people who disagree with the United States government, which some people will celebrate for sure, until there's no one left to fucking, voice any sort of concern because the only people who are left are the bootlickers who are content with what is happening. And even they are going to be under fucking threat, dog. Because now there's a, Republican in office. But what are those bootlicking conservatives going to do when the Democrats come back into office? And they exercise that same exact power to remove them from the country because they don't like that you refuse to use gendered pronouns. Again, like it's all connected, dog. I say it all the time and it doesn't bear it. It's not any less true every time. We exist in a grand ethical value-laden matrix and everything is connected, bro. Right? So in this particular case, again, the reactions to their fear, it's varied. And usually we're familiar with, the flight or flight response. Okay. But the more common and dangerous one, dog, is the fight response. And that's exactly what's happening with ICE enforcements, right? They give such a terrible name to the name ICE. Like, bro, ICE is such a dope name and y'all motherfuckers just ruin it. Right? But, whether it's people who are actively engaging in these, raids or delegating their power to others to do so on their behalf in the form of voting, it's violence nonetheless, dog. Okay. And, that's the fight response. And I need to be clear here that this isn't about not advocating, for some sort of law and order. No, that's not what I'm doing, bro. Right? Because even the most anarchistic of societies, they require eventually some form of policing. Because the fact of the matter is, and I know people are going to probably nitpick that and be like, no, anarchism by nature implies that there's not going to be any policing. You are policing yourself, dog. Because you police your own actions, you don't need a police force or a military force. You understand that, okay? Don't be so fucking obtuse, right? That's what I'm trying to state here. You need to police, and even at the most fundamental level, your own actions in order to live in a just society, right? Because as awesome as most humans are, there does always exist a small fraction, that will fuck it up for everyone unless they are kept in place. So it's not about not policing. It's about reevaluating the ways in which we are doing so, dog. I speak often about the importance of indigenizing and decolonizing. And the fact of the matter is, they themselves, indigenous peoples, they had policing as well. They had elaborate legal systems as well, bro. And it's nothing like the European carceral and punitive systems that we have now, bro. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that I'm some sort of an expert on the matter because I'm not. Okay? The fact of the matter is that I myself am still reconnecting. And by default, I'm not an expert on the Nahuatl legal system, for instance. Okay. To be fair, though, I'm also not an expert on the American legal institutions either, because, I didn't go to law school. Sorry, abuelito. Right? But that doesn't mean that I can't fucking throw in my 2 cents into the matter. But whatever the case is, I unfortunately do not have a complete mapped out alternative. But here's the thing, Doug. For one, there's 2 important things to keep in mind. The first of which being is that doesn't mean that there aren't experts in this right now, currently, and if not on the Nahuatl legal system, then on another indigenous legal system, okay, that currently exists as we're, speaking right now, and that these legal systems are clearly cartographed, right? And that they could be easily implemented today, right? Because guess what? The American legal system is just that, an example of just that, right? So it's not like this is completely outside the realm of possibility, okay? And 2, and most importantly, Doug, that absolutely does not mean that new ones cannot be imagined. Bro, we are human beings. Creativity is embedded into our genetics, okay? We are all toshli. We all have the ability to create, right? A better world is possible. We can envision an entirely new legal system that is necessary for us to do so, okay? That doesn't require the outright fucking oppression of the very fundamental nature of human existence to, operate like the current one that we have now in this world, whether it's being implemented against quote unquote illegal aliens, or whether it's being, imposed upon, political dissidents, or just average everyday American citizens who break the law, right? A better world is possible, bro. Here's the shit though, bro. The future is under no obligation to resemble the past. Meaning that the political systems of the future, the world that we build, it's not beholden to one like the ones that has been created by Europeans. They like to circle jerk and dance around the fact, but they essentially undid all the hard work of their ancestors who fought to escape the fucking clutches of feudalism, and they've returned right back. They brought us all with them, right? That's the bullshit. Like, if y'all want to live in this fucking weird feudalistic cuck society, good for you. But don't fucking drag the rest of us into that shit, dog. You know what I mean? We have the ability to create a better world for everybody. And if y'all want to partake in this, cool. But it's not going to be possible if you insist on keeping us beholden to this hierarchical bullshit society that we're currently living in. It's just not going to happen, bro. Right? We have to broaden our understanding of what life can be. You know what I mean? And as much as these European Americans hate it, Europeans in general, dog, as much as they hate it, this is the globalized world that we're living in, right? And barring some unforeseen cataclysmic event, it's never going to go back to this fucking the days of blood and soil nativism. I just, I fuck with Alex Jones, ironically, bro. I think he's funny for the shit that he does and he says, but I don't agree with 95% of it, like 99% of the things that he says. When he pulls up the receipt, like, well, I don't have a choice. I got to believe it. You know what I mean? Because it's scientifically proven. It's right there. But 99% of the shit that he says, I don't agree with. This whole, the globalist and all that. Like, you're a fucking idiot, dog. We obviously live in a connected, digitized, globalized world. There's nothing you're going to do about that. Right? And this whole, the globalist. That's fucking the bourgeoisie, dog. What are you talking about? We've known this. This is not new. You know what I'm saying? And those days are over. Like, the days of isolationism. We don't live in those days anymore, dog. And it's pretty funny to me, honestly, thinking about how, like, European Americans, the racist ones, will always be like, go back to your country. And it's funny because you would think that if they have such a problem with brown people here in the United States of America, that they could just go back to Europe, but they can't. And the reason why they can't is because their ancestors fucking spent the last 500 years colonizing and waging imperial terror over the whole fucking world. And because of that, now the whole world goes to Europe too. And basically these, European Americans, the racist fuckheads, have nowhere left to run to. Like, they're surrounded now. There's nowhere left for them to return to. And that just is so ironic, and it brings me so much joy just thinking about how much they hate people of color, but they can never do anything to escape them ever again. Like, you brought this upon yourself. And it's just, I can't tell you how much joy it brings me. You know what I mean? Almost as much joy as it brings me as knowing that they can't fucking get laid to save their lives. Literally, their birth rates are just nosediving, bro. Right? And there's nothing that they can do to fix it. Now, currently, maybe in the future sometime, right? But as of right now, there's good luck. Whatever the case. Again, in circling back to this idea of structuring a better world for all of us, one of the things that I've continuously tried to emphasize is that I'm not a Marxist, right? For a variety of reasons. Chief among which being that there's no need to give Marx and Engels credit for ideas that are a property of the human experience. Marx did not create fucking Marxism, dog, or communism. Hunger and poverty did here in the Western world, just so we're clear. When people are hungry and when they're fucking poor and they don't have access to healthcare, they start asking questions why. And inevitably, they're going to come to the understanding that it's because all food, scarcity, healthcare, it's purposely gatekept in order to ensure people are working, right? There's this video of this fucking asshole, bro. He's on MSNBC and he compares workers to dogs who are, working dogs who are only fed at night once a day because a working dog is an obedient dog. That's the system y'all are trying to keep up. Not you, my lovely listener, but the motherfuckers that disagree and say, oh, communism kills. Yeah, well, guess what? Capitalism kills too. Far more people than communism has. And more importantly, more directly, it doesn't reduce you to a fucking a dog-like existence where you're purposely kept in fucking hunger and deprived from healthcare because doing so ensures that you remain an obedient worker, right? Nevertheless, again, I got to continue to emphasize, not a Marxist. Why? Because beyond the hunger and, poverty element that creates Marxists in the Western world, our ancestors were communalists long before Marx was ever even a fucking twinkle in his daddy's eye. Okay? Thousands of years before Marx ever existed, our ancestors were practicing a collectivist form of philosophy or of governance that could today be somewhat, correlated to Marxism, which is why I will, lean heavily towards sharing these ideas when I do on Insta, for instance, through a Marxist lens. But the fact of the matter is they're completely different, dog. They're completely different, right? And it's important that we start really listening and engaging with how and why in order to help navigate our escape from this fucking techno-feudal dystopic capitalistic hellscape that we're all living in, dog, right? The trajectory is there. It's been mapped out through indigenous knowledge, right? The native ways of governing, are largely unknown for a reason. And the reason is because they will completely upend this colonial feudalistic society that we're currently living in. And it has every ability to be implemented, right? So for instance, going back to just one, I'll give you the example of the Nahuatl nation, right? They practiced a form of governance where the state itself did own and control everything, but it distributed the goods in accordance to the merits of the people and the accomplishments of the people within the nation, right? This all is like tied into this idea that I was talking about earlier with maternalism and the matriarchy and all that kind of shit, where I was talking about how it's embedded in our genes. I see a lot of like indigenous people, right, especially Mexicans, who are drawn to Marxist Leninist philosophies. And, on the surface level, it's easy to explain that away by saying that the reason we are is because we've been marginalized and subjugated by capitalism, which, don't get me wrong, we absolutely have been and are, right? But again, Europeans do not have ownership of these ideas, dog. And more importantly, not only are we not strictly, victims of European actions in, the sense that we're passive recipients to their vision, but more importantly, again, we're the living memory of our ancestors. And as such, the ways they envision the world, they're very much alive with us, dog. And it's embodied in one of the ways through the paintings of Chalchiuhtlicue. Hence why she's up here. She's not up here just because she's the mother. She's up here for a variety of reasons. Let me be clear. She's the mother of life, dog. And this painting, this fucking book right here shows us the future that is possible if only we're willing to listen to the indigenous knowledge, dog. This one, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, for those of you who are just listening, I'm pointing to the painting on my wall. It, like I mentioned, doesn't have the rivers underneath it that shows the people floating in it. But the one that does, the one that's on YouTube now, right? That's exactly what it's representing in this particular case. It represents the belief that, ideas are an elevated part of humanity. And in this particular case, it's, the headpiece, the idea is a headpiece that's being placed on top of the river, which represents that life, the water, is its own entity that possesses its own elevated ideas And that these ideas, again, they do not belong to one individual person. That's why I'm always like, man, fuck Marx, fuck Plato, fuck Socrates. That's European colonial possession type thinking, that they own these ideas. Fuck no, dog. These ideas are a part of life. They're a collective part of the human experience, right? And this delves deeper into what I'm talking about, how the Nahuatl legal system could be perceived as something of collectivist, right? Because they didn't believe in ownership, dog. Ideas included. They believed in possession, don't get me wrong, right? But not in ownership. Like you have something temporarily, and eventually you have to give it away, whether it's because it's needed for something else or because you die, like straight up. And that's what I was talking about earlier, like this fucking weird understanding of relationships and possession. Like, I don't belong to you. You don't belong to me. We're here enjoying this fucking fleeting experience together. And inevitably, we're going to part ways, whether we want to or not, right? So in terms of like the society and the state and all that kind of stuff, the state, again, they own everything. And every person that lives within that state is given, their possessions in accordance to their accomplishments. Like, they're given possessions first in accordance to, or they're given things in accordance to their needs, like, food, water, shelter, safety. Like, they were given that. But then on top of that, you were given more in accordance to your proven ability to utilize those in a way to make better the community, right? Because that's the whole point in the Nahuatl philosophy. That's the corn kernel. You find the purpose behind your corn kernel, and then you activate it in such a way to sow a better future for the descendants, or to sow a better present time for right now. So if you're like this incredible, engineer who is building these structures that are benefiting the society, of course you're going to be given more materials to continue doing so. Not because of your own personal glory. Like, if you look at the codices, you'll never see a signature of who created them, ever, from the Nahuatl peoples. Why? Because it wasn't their belonging. The codices didn't belong to one individual artist. The ideas didn't belong to one individual philosopher, like these colonial fuckheads that want us to think that Socrates invented philosophy. Fuck you, right? They're a collective human experience. So, the more you accomplish, the better, you prove yourself worthy of these belongings. And the more that you achieve, the more that you benefit the society. And, once you die, like, that's it. There's no like, oh, this person created this beautiful monument here, let's honor them forever. Like, no, dude, it wasn't for that person. It was for the betterment rather of the collective society, right? There's, again, complete different understanding of reality than this vain, narcissistic individualism of the Western Christian world that we're currently living in. These items that were given as possessions, they were, again, only momentarily, dog. And it wasn't ever meant to escalate the ladder of economic wealth, because this concept didn't even exist back then. Capitalism is 500 years old, bro. It's new compared to the scope of humanity. The world can operate without capitalism, right? One way or another, it's going to come to the point where we have to decide what's more important, the literal fucking earth that we live on, or capitalism, right? The elite, when they do their little breakaway civilization, maybe they can decide for us, right? Or we're going to decide for ourselves. Whatever the case is, like, this notion that you need money for capitalism in general to survive is, nope, I'm not buying it, bro. Right? So, in this particular case, they understood that everybody needs to look out for everyone else, with the benefit being that the person beside you will be of your benefit as well. When you help other people, it helps you, essentially, is what they're trying to tell us, right? Everyone does better when everyone does better type shit. And again, this is not at all like communism, bro, because in communism, everything belongs to everyone, but no one is supposed to have more than everyone and than anyone else. And that's not what they're telling us here, bro. They're not telling us that here. They're telling you straight up, like, yes, the Chalchiuhtlicue is everything, right? The state. But the people who benefited more, they're going to receive it in accordance. One of the biggest knocks, right? They consider it a knock on Marxism that the capitalists come up with is that if you take away the incentive for profit, then people are going to be lazy. That's not what's happening here, bro. It's not what's happening here. This very much provides you a reason to try to push yourself to produce more. Again, not for the vain narcissistic glory that you'll achieve, but for the understanding that by doing so, you're bettering not only yourself, but others as well. That the person that has this capability, right, is renowned for that alone. Like, yes, this is the person that we go to whenever we need to build dams or whenever we need paintings, right? And that alone is an impetus to pursue excellence. And it's not like you can sit here and say, oh, that's not going to work, because the Spaniards were wowed with the Tenochtitlan. They thought they were in a dream because of how beautiful it was. How did it get there? Through what it is that I'm telling you, dog, right? Hard workers and skilled workers, if you value them, will always act accordingly. And although they're not going to be necessarily remembered as their individualistic accomplishments, the motivation to do better will always be there, but without the fucking violent competitiveness of capitalism. Okay? When you value the merit and the skill, that when you make merit and skill the determining factor in who receives more, and it's all with the understanding that it's going to be for the benefit of the Calpulli, the society will organize itself accordingly. Okay? We are told that in this society, the person who lived to offer their gifts to everyone else, that was the person who was revered. That these were considered the elevated thoughts, rather, that people should strive for. And this is, like virtue ethics in a sense that we're polishing ourselves to be a better person of value. But again, nothing like the understanding of virtue ethics that we get from the Western Christian philosophical tradition, right? This is more along the lines of everyone has something unique to offer. And the point is to find that and then act upon it. This is what I was talking about with the corn kernel earlier. We're all born with one. And the goal in philosophizing is trying to figure out what our corn kernel is for, and then trying to make the best use of it with the short amount of thread that we have to do so. Another really important takeaway from this particular, understanding of reality is, the understanding that, dog, we cannot take credit for the accomplishments of our ancestors. There's like a whole disho, a saying in Nahuatl, right? About how they would look down on this. The idea that people are resting on the laurels of their ancestors' accomplishments. Like, no, dude, that completely violates the rule of the Cintli, right? The rule of the corn. We don't come here to rest on the laurels of our ancestors. We come here to, to take what they've left us and improve it in order for the future descendants to come and do the same, to continue elevating the society in which we're living in, right? We're here to build upon the legacy, not rest on the laurels, right? We are also not in perpetual ownership of anything, okay? Because again, eventually it will be returned to whence it came from. Whether it's the Calpulli or the earth, it does not matter, dog, right? And to attempt to argue otherwise, again, it leads to this monopolization and concentration of resources, which it just never ends well. We're seeing it right now. And the only reason we believe otherwise is straight up because our lack of education has allowed us to become corrupted. This is what the ancestors tell us, dog. Okay? Which goes back to the painting of Chalchiuhtlicue. In this painting, we see someone in the water. They're reaching out for something, dog. They're reaching out for something. And this is a concept of, the concept is known as Nahuatl, right? The idea that we are here to earn and to achieve something, not simply be given or granted things. What you deserve is always conditioned by how much effort you put into life, right? You want a happy, beautiful relationship? Guess what, dog? You're going to have to work at it. It's not going to be given to you, and you're not going to it's not something you're entitled to. You have to work to be the partner that you want to be with, essentially, to tie it into what I was talking about earlier. So yeah, dog, in this painting, we see someone in the water who's reaching out for something. And again, this is the concept of the Nahuatl. And that is the idea that we are here to earn and to achieve, right? Not simply be granted things. So by that logic, what you deserve will always be conditioned by how much effort you put into life. So this lazy, misrepresented even misunderstanding of Marxism that most people have who are against it. It's, for one, not really fair of Marxism. It's a blatant misreading of Marxism in many ways. And two, more directly, it has nothing to do with this ancestral Nahuatl approach to structuring society. It's just completely different, man. And that's why I also insist on maintaining that, Marxism and these ancestral, in this particular case, Nahuatl legal system, they're just mutually exclusive. They're not the same thing. And I got to continue to emphasize this because I remember seeing this one thread talking about how Mexicans were so you know, uniquely, I don't want to say uniquely because I'm sure they were just speaking because they only had experience with Mexicans, but I'm sure many other peoples in the quote unquote Central and South Americas are, the same exact shit before y'all start coming at me like, oh, he's being, a Mexican superiority type motherfucker. Like, no, dude, it's the indigenous culture. You know what I mean? Cultures of all of Turtle Island. But, the thread was about Mexicans, and it was talking about how we seem to have a natural predisposition to Marxism. And it's, again, yes, but no. And it's yes, because it's in our genetic legacy and our genetic memory to come from collectivist societies. And no, because it's nothing like what Marxism is. It's something completely different. And differences are important to highlight because in attempting to cartograph this path moving forward to escape this current techno-feudal hellscape that we're living in through this Western Christian, world, it's going to be important to distinguish between the two because of how deeply ingrained the hatred is, and perhaps rightfully so, or not, for Marxism. You know what I mean? Like, no, dude, we're not doing Marxism. We're doing something completely different. And again, it's always conditioned in this. It's like deeply, it's intermeshed. So again, I'm going to keep pointing at these paintings back here, right? The books, they're books. I got to continue to emphasize that. I call them paintings because that's, what they are, but realistically, they're books. And one of the most difficult things that a lot of people have when attempting to read these books, these paintings, especially, coming from a European lens, it's definitely one of the more difficult things that I had initially is unpacking the ways in which they're deeply intertwined. So it seamlessly merges, quote unquote, Marxist philosophy with existential philosophy, for example, in this particular case being that the existential component, what is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Why am I here? Is intimately integrated with the collective societal aspect of it. And in the sense that you are here, again, to reiterate, to find your corn, what the purpose of your corn is, your corn seed, and, make it happen, figure out what it could be best be used for in the short amount of time, the thread that you have to be able to, that you have to do so, right? And it's always in direct proportion to, or not direct in proportion rather, but it's always directly influenced by the impact it will have on your society that you're living in with that strict intention. You know what I mean? So one of the biggest issues in attempting to rebuild a better world is undoing this hyper narcissistic, individualistic society of the West and reintegrating the, ancestral ways for sure. But in this particular sense, the understanding that we are all intimately intertwined and that our actions do impact one another, generally for the negative in this hyper competitive capitalist individualist society of the West that we're beholden to, but it could be for the better as well, right? Which was the example given by the ancestral Nahuatl tradition. Now, moving on with the example of the Nahuatl. If you're able to surpass our own limitations, they tell us, this will be translated into the way in which, we earn and deserve in life. So what that means is that we are looking for excellence. Again, not because we're competing with others, but rather because we're the Nahuatl who will only gain things in no manner, in the manner of which our efforts, our capabilities, our skills, our intentions, and overall the way that we conduct ourselves towards ourselves and others in life, right? That's how we will gain things. And going back to the previous episode of the podcast when I was talking about, and I mentioned this in the previous episode where I was mentioning how, we all inherit from the past, right? We all inherit from our ancestors, and you can choose to, act upon that inheritance or to not act upon that inheritance. Either way, like, it is what it is. It's neither good nor bad, right? So just to reiterate, in case you didn't listen to the last episode, let's say that I felt like the burden of sharing this philosophy. Well, it's not uniquely mine, for one. You know what I mean? I've inherited this philosophy quite literally from thousands of years of evolution. And two, there were other people in my lineage. I am this way because of my ancestors. You know what I mean? There was philosophers before me that came before me, and they carried this burden with them, this weight. I don't want to call it a burden. but they carried this responsibility with them. And some acted upon it and some didn't, either because they just simply chose not to, or because of the situation that they found themselves in, the material conditions that they found themselves in. They simply were incapable of doing so, right? So that's, again, reiterating here. So just to, finish that point off real quick, actually, the point that I was mentioning in the previous episode was that the weight that it feels. That's why I used the word weight earlier, that I feel sometimes for, in life. We all feel this weight, this pressure, you know what I mean, to achieve certain things. And the fact is, like, you can do it or not. It's not the David Goggins example. Remember, it's not some grand ontological battle. You're not competing with life. You're not in a confrontational relationship with life, whether you do it or not. Like it doesn't matter, right? The future is going to come regardless, and your descendants will deal with the consequences, good or bad, of your actions, right? So in going back to this, it's the same thing. There's no pressure for you to do anything. You don't have to do shit if you don't want to. However, you're not going to be given anything in accordance, right? For the people, if you don't want to try, whatever, dog, it ain't no thing. Don't do nothing in life. You will be given the basic needs that you have to survive: food, water, shelter, safety. But, don't expect much more to be given to you, because that's all you merit. If you, choose, however, to act upon this, quite literally, the world is your oyster. You can do whatever you want. I dropped a podcast a while ago, about a year ago. Was it a year ago? Shit, it might have been 2 years ago. I don't know, man. It's called High Power, right? And it's a song. It was after the song by Kendrick Lamar. And whenever I'm learning about this song really comes to mind because of this, right? Kendrick, he nailed it, man. When he said, to reiterate, if you want to listen to more thoughts on this, go listen to that podcast. That's why I mentioned it. But just to summarize, when he talks about how write your own hieroglyphs, build your own pyramids, right? Get off the slave ship, all that, something like that, right? That's what he's talking about, man. We're so comfortable in resting on the laurels of our ancestors that we don't, do anything because of it. We just look back into the past and we say, oh, look at what my ancestors did. They have such great accomplishments. Yeah, absolutely. But how are you going to honor that moving forward? You know what I mean? You're supposed to build on that. That's the rule of the saintly, right? The rule of the corn, the sacred maize, dog. Like, you got to continue to sow it and ensure that it gets better with each passing generation, so that the descendants can inherit something better than what you did, right? Or you can't. That's your choice too. Now, in going back to the example of the young woman on top of the water, what we see again is that she's reaching, right? She's reaching for something. And that something is grounded by another thing that itself is hidden. And in this case, it's hidden by the water. It's hidden underneath the water, right? It's important to emphasize here that this woman is not on some gender shit, dog, just so we're 100% clear. But rather, it's an embodiment of the both masculine and feminine forces that every human being embodies. I say this shit all the time, bro, and it's just constant examples that unfold about how our ancestral ways were just light years ahead of even the world that we're living in today. As technologically advanced as the world that we're living in today, they were even more advanced, dog. It's weird saying this because people automatically take umbrage with it. And it's like, no, they were savage, primitive Indians. I'm like, okay, that's colonial brainwashing, bro. And it's funny how you have no problem admitting, about ancient civilizations and lost, technology when Graham Hancock is talking about it. But as soon as we tell you, like, yeah, our ancestors were far advanced than what the current Western Christian world is, suddenly it's an issue, right? But that's what's happening, dog. So in this particular instance, we know, for instance, now that men, for example, and women have both estrogen and testosterone. Doesn't matter if you're a male or a female, you have both. Okay. Men obviously have more, women, testosterone, women more estrogen, but men still have estrogen. That's why they take estrogen blockers when they're fucking on steroids, right? So they don't get the bitch tits. That's what they're called, man. Please just don't come at me because of the language, right? Anyways, this is what they're talking about, dog. When they talk about masculine and feminine forces, like, we all have these masculine and feminine forces within us. And more directly for them, what the masculine forces are well, they're both sensory organs. Okay. So the masculine sensory organs are the external organs. So like our vision, our nose, our lips, our tongue, our ears, those are all masculine forces, essences that allow us to process the information of reality as it's coming in, right? and structure reality as a whole. Again, going back to the painting and how complex it is, like that's deeply phenomenological, bro. Every time I'm learning this, I'm like, bro, like it took Western European philosophy all the way until the 19th century, 20th century, actually, my bad, the 1900s to start talking about like consciousness as being this thing that the human body experiences. Did our ancestors were, they just understood reality to be that way tens of thousands of years ago. And that's what they're saying is like our masculine, senses there what help us filter reality on the external. But we also have them inside of us. And those are the feminine, the feminine essences, right? That help us process and make sense of reality. So it's like an embodiment, right? The corporeal embodiment, if you will, that helps us piecemeal, or not piecemeal, but rather piece together, this reality, whatever the fuck it is, right? So yeah, dog. So again, it's not like on some masculine, feminine, gendered bullshit. It's like deeply, deeply phenomenological and existential and, communalist and collectivist. It's highly, highly intertwined, right? So in this particular sense, these, masculine organs, they allow us to navigate the world. And again, the feminine essences help us to process that information as it's, within our body. So the reason why it's a feminine essence then is because since it's within our body, it's meant to represent something that, again, is super dense and super layered, bro. Right? So beyond being just sensory organs, they also play like a metaphorical function. And in this particular sense, the metaphor is that it's something that is hidden. The feminine essence is something that is hidden, right? So in this particular sense of the example of Chalchiuhtlicue and the two essences that are swimming in the waters, it's meant to represent the feminine essence in this particular sense of our thoughts. But not just our thoughts, bro. Our instincts, our intuition, and in general, our extrasensorial perceptions, right? So in this case, it's telling us that the feminine force within us, it's looking for something. It's looking for things that are within us, but that are hidden from us, as this is the only way that it can achieve. So again, going back to what I was telling you earlier about the corn seed, like we all have that corn seed and we need to figure out what our corn seed can be utilized for. Some are best used for tortillas. Some are best used for pozole. Either way, they can all be put to use and made better, right? So the metaphor here would be, okay, well, what am I here for? What was I put on this earth for? Why did I descend to this slippery earth? What is my purpose? And once I find that purpose, the corn seed, how can I best utilize it in the short amount of time that I have, the thread, in order to make sure that I can help sow a better future for, the descendants? And it's just like, I don't know, it's beautiful. Like I just talking it out loud makes me realize how deeply advanced this philosophy was, bro. Like it's quite literally the point in all of philosophy. When motherfuckers say shit like, know thyself, right? That's what they're talking about. We have this unseen, intangible force within us that's wondering for things that they can't be seen, right? And they can't be told to us. And in many cases can't be answered, like the meaning of life or, what happens after death. But yet it still persists. And the unyielding desire to make sense of it all. Shared universal human experience, bro, right? So, this is the intertwining of all these vast philosophical traditions in this one, just small piece of the painting, dog. Right? So, again, if you're watching along in the videos, you'll see that she's reaching out for arrows in this particular sense. Our feminine force, she's reaching out for arrows. Okay. And there's also a necklace in the water, dog. And you'll notice that they're pretty large compared to everything else that's in the painting. And that's because, these two elements we're told are meant to be pretty big in life. Like they're very important, I should state. Not like big as in size wise, but big as in they're important, right? And what it's meant to represent is two things. So for one, it's a necklace as a whole is meant to represent society. And the individual beads, the gems, that's us as individuals, okay? So the idea is that the only way that we can find what our purpose is if we first polish ourselves into these precious stones, okay, that are worthy of being part of a beautiful necklace. You notice the collectivism here emerging because it's stating that in order to have a good society, a beautiful society, you have to make yourself a beautiful member of that society. Not aesthetically necessarily, but, in terms of the person that you are, the person that is going to contribute to the society by figuring out what they are here for and acting upon it in accordance to their talents, right? And the only way that we can do that, of course, is by polishing ourselves. We got to polish our thoughts. We have to polish our emotions so that they can be a part of that beautiful necklace. And more specifically, the polishing of ourselves, the individual gems again, is intended to be a beneficious part of something greater, dog. This necklace that we're currently in right now is just an extension of an even greater necklace. And that is the long trajectory of humanity, the existence of human beings on this fucking earth, bro. Right? Yeah, it's just such a heavy existential weight. Like when you really start to contextualize it in that scope, like it's so easy to get caught up in these identity politics bullshit and telling us that we're all separate and different, which, obviously, in terms of ethnicity and in terms of culture, of course we are. But at the core, we're all humans and we're all part of one necklace, dog. And it's the necklace of humanity. You know what I mean? So just thinking about the ways in which the role that we play in making that necklace beautiful can play or not. That's up to you again to decide. It really hits heavily. Anyways, as for the arrows, those are intended to mean objectivity and earnestness and the capability of achieving goals. I've talked a lot about the arrows in the past, so I won't delve too deeply into them, but I will state that these, the qualities of the arrows, they should be accurately understood as something that we're putting our body towards, a goal that we're putting our body towards, our mind towards, our time towards, and, that we're constantly aiming, like an arrow or throwing an arrow, right? To understand these things. And the only way that we can do that is by continuous, repetitive practice of doing so, right? And these arrows, man, they're not just for showing. They're for shooting, and they're aimed and aiming at things, at goals, bro. Like they're not just meant to be like, oh, look at this great talent that I have. Okay, but what are you doing with it? What are you going to utilize this talent for? What is your purpose, right? Do you know what you're using it for? Or are you just fucking throwing it aimlessly out there and wherever it lands, it lands? You know what I mean? Like, no, you got to have intentionality. This whole fucking giant book that Heidegger wrote with its dense, complex language. And that's all he was saying. The importance of focused intentionality on the direct actions at hand. It's a fundamental part of the human experience that is embodied that is embodied by way of the sensorial perceptions that we have of all of reality. And, you have this one actualized fleeting moment of you in this body, and that you have the ability to do something with it, create projects. That's all Heidegger was saying, right? But this is thousands of years before Heidegger came along, right? You gotta have focused intentionality here in order to make something of your life. And again, the question then would become, naturally, what are you aiming for? And, an important thing to ask ourselves would be, is it just wealth? Is that the end goal? Right? Now, I'm not stating that money is bad by any stretch of the imagination, because obviously we need it to survive, right? But there's more to life than just surviving, dog. It's very primitive, very base level, very animalistic, the instinct towards survival. We, again, are the result of this evolutionary process that millions of years, dog, beyond just humanity, millions of years of evolutionary process that led to this one particular moment of you and I here today, the creation of all of life. And what this implies then is that ideally we are capable of further polishing this into something greater. The same way that the ancestors took a wild little, seed and created corn out of it is the same way that, as seemingly impossible as it sounds today, we, through our thoughts, words, and actions, can create something more beautiful than has ever been envisioned in the history of humanity, in terms of society, in terms of art, in terms of ourselves, whatever the case might be, Doug. Right? We just got to ask ourselves basic philosophical questions. How am I going to paint this life? See the aesthetic element unfolding here, right? So we have the collectivist, a political element of the painting. We have the existential element of the painting. We have the phenomenological element of the painting. And now we have the aesthetic element of the painting. All things that Western philosophy would bracket as individual, fields of study, all wrapped into one, like, it's not simple, but it's one beautiful painting. You know what I'm saying? Here, I'm pointing again to the ones in the background. But in this particular case, the one of Chalchiuhtlicue, for those of you who are only listening, right? We ask ourselves, how am I going to paint life? How am I going to sing life? Right? This is the whole floricanto shit, bro. The idea that life is not permanent, but at least we can leave something behind, right? And what we leave will be, of course, as I've mentioned before, fruit, the fruit of our flower, right? The xochi, the 5-petal flower that we are, right? Our life at the culmination, the flower of our life, when it comes to its culmination. You know what I mean? What does it bear? It bears a fruit. And that fruit ideally should be something that others can be nourished from, right? Something that should be communal, or not if you choose not to be. As a quick aside, this right here is just another reason why I really do not like Latinx dorks, bro. The Latinx, apparently, is that how you call them? I don't care what they're called. They're fucking nerds, right? And the reason why is because, again, a lot of them are caught up in this progressive, social justice movement of the United States. And it's like, you're not faithfully representing. They're not trying to be clear, but it's erasure. And that's why one of the reasons I don't like it, and many people don't like it, it's erasure, right? And in this particular sense, it's erasing the indigenous element of our being. Okay. Because again, it's not what we're owed. It's about deserving what you earn, bro. And this requires that we surpass our limitations. We have to look for excellence, not out of competition again with others, right? But because we are Nahuatl. We are people who are, trying to practice this, and we'll only have things in life in accordance to our intention and our conduction in life. So again, this isn't a pressure. It's an option. Me personally, I feel like the Latinx people, they choose not to. And rather than embrace that responsibility for having done so, they still demand something in return for choosing to do nothing. And it's like, no, dude, that's not how life works, man. And to say that our ancestors were different was completely mistaken and violently anti-indigenous, bro, because it goes against everything that it is that I just, taught you. Anyways, and going back to this ancestral shit, one of the things, like, it's just funny, man, because when I was first sitting down to write my hood philosophy, I genuinely thought I was cooking, bro. As in the sense like, oh shit, I'm creating something that's never been thought of before. It's unique to me because I'm the one that grew up in the hood and I'm the philosophy major who has these unique insights. Nah, dog. Not even remotely true. Not even remotely close to being true. As I mentioned before, I'm just inheriting shit that was already thought about by my ancestors, dog. And sometimes I choose to carry that weight and sometimes I don't, right? Hence the 2-month break. And the reason why I state that is because, the next question that should ideally come from, what are we doing with this painting of life? How are we going to go about painting this life? What is the meaning of life? What is our purpose, right? What is our objective? Ideally, one of the questions that should follow from that is, why weren't we ever taught this from a young age? Why isn't this something that we're, from a young age not drilled per se, but it's not brainwashing, but this is something that we should be focusing on from a very young age. Like, hey man, you're this, whatever you are, because you were born on this particular day, right? Let's say you are Chalchiuhtlicue because you were born on one alligator, right? And because of that, you have the characteristics of one and alligator, but you also have the characteristics of your parents, both of them, right? Whatever they are, and it's put together, and we got to try to figure out and also from, as far back as we can possibly figure out the traits of your ancestors, and then try to figure out what that all implies for you so that we can work toward figuring out what it is that you personally are here for, so that you can begin learning it and acting upon it for the betterment of not only yourself, but of the community. From a young age, there's this idea that kids are too dumb or too young to philosophize. That's nonsense, bro. Kids are probably some of the best philosophers in the world at a young age because they ask nothing but questions. The kids are full with questions. They just, constant, insatiable curiosity as children. And it's not until we endure the fucking soul-crushing mediocrity of public school indoctrination that impetus to question slowly dissipates from our lives. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, nah, dude, you could teach kids in elementary school and younger about philosophy. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we should be doing. We should be training them from a young age to figure this out, right? because the world could genuinely benefit from it, to keep it as blunt as possible. But of course, it's not what we do. We're just trained to, to aim to survive. And it's like, I mean, it's important. Yes, of course. But what comes after that? What is the meaning after that? What is the purpose after that? Right? Again, wealth is great and all, but there's how many examples of people who are fabulously wealthy leading meaningless lives? There's how many researchers that show how much money you make before your baseline happiness just, levels out. There's more to life than this, man. And unfortunately, in this world that we're living in, it's not something of concern, which is having detrimental effects on the overall well-being of not only the individual mental health, but on society as well, dog. You see society just seemingly free-falling. And a large, not inconsequential part of that is absolutely the lack of proper education that we, purposely, in my opinion, don't receive, because they have a system in play that they don't want to lose. And, this creates a lot of pain. It creates a lot of loneliness. It creates a lot of suffering. And the only, things that we're given to cope with it, as I've mentioned before, are those that addict us to, the bourgeoisie, the things that they've created to monetize off of our pain and suffering: drugs, alcohol, hookup culture, social media, etc. And it's just like, there's definitely has to be more to life than just this, right? Again, we are meant to be echoes resounding from the songs of the past. That's what we are. We're not just these things that are thrown into existence like the Western existentialists would have us believe, who are suffering the consequences of our parents' choices to bring us from the warmth of nothingness into the abyss of, existence. Like, nah, man, we're the extension of a long song that's been going on for a very long time. And we have the ability to continue that song. And all we got to do is figure out how, like, again, my little corn kernel. What is it that I'm going to go, sorry, bear with me. What is it that I'm going to sing? What is it that I'm going to paint, right? Whatever it is we choose, again, tying it in with what we've been talking about, the collectivist legal systems, you will be rewarded in accordance, right? Because what we leave will always be communal in nature. And that's true today, every bit as much as it is true 1,000 years ago, dog. Our actions are communal. Sorry, right? We've been brainwashed to believe otherwise, that it's individualistic and that my actions only affect me. It's not true. For better or worse, our actions have communal impacts, okay? Before I finish with this, I just can't help but laugh, honestly, dog. This is the fundamental flaw in Western Christianity, right? And that is that they are so pressed for authenticity that, they're so pressed for authenticity, bro. But even that loses its meaning in the fact of nothingness for them. You know what I'm saying? Like, nothing matters to them, literally, because of how hyper individualistic they are. There is no meaning and no purpose in their life. And they're so miserable and they're so depressed that the best answer that they've come up with is either accept the misery and depression. You got to roll the rock up and down the hill and pretend to be happy regardless, right? Or the fucking death cult of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, right? Like, you're going to suffer in this life and you're going to suffer in the next life if you don't make other people suffer here. And we're waiting for our Messiah to return. And the only way it's going to do so is we bring about more death and suffering. You're terrified of death. Don't worry. Just believe in me and you'll live forever. Like, what? No, dude, that's crazy, bro. And that's why it's one of the reasons why I'm convinced this world is losing its mind, dog. The fatalism inherent, the nihilism inherent with this hyper individualistic, narcissistic society, where even authenticity loses meaning because, the sun's going to explode and it's going to take all traces of the humanity with it in 30 billion years. And when I die, no one's going to remember me. Like, fuck out of here, bro. The idea for recognition, the selfish, narcissistic egoism that you can't fathom, the idea of planting a tree that you'll never have the privilege of sitting in the shade of. Right? And because of that, you'd rather not plant a tree because if my life was miserable, then other people's lives must be miserable as well. Like, it's insane, bro. Right? And, it's no wonder then that the society that we live in is so fucked, essentially, because if that's how people, operate, they have no hope for a better life. They have no hope for a better future. Okay. And that's why we have this hollow, this vapid, alleged solution in the form of, Western society, essentially, dog. This mass produced society, this bureaucratically administered society, which itself only perpetuates this vicious cycle in that the individual, right? The individuality we feel is one that is the same as everyone else's. Like, nah, dog. No, there's so much more to life than that. And, it can be found and it can be enacted and we can act upon it, right? It just takes a complete reevaluation of our values. It takes a complete divorcing of this Western Christian world. And it takes abandoning of everything that it is that we've inherited from these European structures and a return to the matriarchal indigenous societies that valued individual human lives as well as the pursuit of future descendants that come after us. Speaking of such a bleak, dreary society, that's going to be the segue into the movie for this particular episode, which is The Mist by Stephen King. I'm not going to lie, dog. I'm new to this movie and this shit was dope. I really, really enjoyed it. When I was younger, I kind of just ignored it. I don't know why. Like Stephen King movies, there was one about like a corn maze. That one was kind of whack recently, right? But by and large, most Stephen King movies hit hard, bro. And for whatever reason, I just always ignored this one. I thought the name was stupid, honestly, right? And it was recently recommended to me. And I said, fuck it, why not? Let's watch this bitch, right? I had just finished rewatching. I just love that movie. I'm actually doing an analysis on it for a future episode. The Cabin in the Woods, right? I was watching that one. And then when that one ended, The Mist was suggested right afterwards. I was like, fuck it, let's watch this bitch, right? So glad I did, dog. So glad I did. Because it literally fit perfectly with the scope of this particular episode. I won't give away too much of the movie. It's been like 20 years almost since it came out, right? But just in case you haven't seen it, I won't give away too much. But like most Stephen King movies, it does take place in Derry, Maine, right? Or so it's naturally bleak and gray and rainy and all that kind of shit. And there's, the token black character, the racism towards the character. There's, the townies who are considered, to be throwbacks societally, with their beliefs and all that. But there's also like monsters, you know what I'm saying? Stephen King movie. It's got all the familiar tropes, right? And in watching this movie, dog, it really helped contextualize a lot of the shit that we're going through, for me personally, right? And the reason why is because, again, I'm not young, bro. I'm not old per se, but I'm not young. I'm 38. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to lie, dog. Like, I've had a pretty difficult time understanding what's happening right now. Like, wrapping my head around. It's just so much, bro. It's a constant bombardment, purposely. Like, they're constantly bombarding us. It's part of the class war, right? Trying to overwhelm us. And it's been very difficult for me personally, I'm not going to lie, to gain my footing in these first 100 days of this Trump presidency, right? Which was to be expected. That's how it goes for every presidency. That's why the 100 days is a thing in the first place, right? But again, I can, like, I've been around for a while, and sometimes I honestly feel like the fervor of the current political climate, it's a little concerning. I'm not gonna lie, right? Like, in the sense that what the potential repercussions are, but also because it just doesn't make that much sense to me yet, right? The Mist really helped clarify a lot of it, though, just so we're clear. But take post 9/11 for example. It was formative for me. I was in high school. I was a freshman in high school when that happened, right? And I distinctly remember the wave of patriotism that just swept across the United States with the yellow ribbons and the American flags following the attacks on the Twin Towers, okay? And more importantly, like the fervoristic warmongering, right? By everyone was ready to go to war, dog, because we quote unquote had to avenge the attacks on American soil, right? This jingoistic rhetoric was so intense at that time, bro, that it was nauseating, but it was understandable. Like, it was easy to understand, Okay. This time it's like the same, but different, dog. And it's different in that for the longest time, I've really had a hard time figuring out why. But again, after watching The Mist, it all made sense, dog. And the reason is because realistically, like the characters in The Mist, what's happening right now, bro, is motherfuckers are scared, dog. People are terrified. They're not going to show it externally. They won't admit it, but they're scared, dog. And honestly, I'm not trying to be like a black pill doomer. Obviously, you can't just listen to what I just said and take away black pill doomer from it, right? But it would be misleading to say that I wasn't a little bit afraid, right, of what could potentially happen. And I think it's true for a lot of people on this planet, dog. Motherfuckers are just shook to their core, bro. And rather than acknowledge that fear and try to work through a rational, answer to address it, most people are masking it in the form of this hyper Christian, white Christian, more specifically, nationalism and patriotism, dog. And even people of color, bro, are falling into this. And it's pretty terrifying for a lot of reasons, okay? And the reason why I feel it's so different than from the 9/11, for example, is because unlike 9/11, where it was coming from a place of revenge, this one's coming from a place of fear, bro, right? It's not coming from anger. It's not coming from, like the desire to forget back. It's coming from genuine fear. Motherfuckers from all over the world are afraid right now, dog. And they're acting accordingly. So it's not just like America's always a danger because of being the most powerful military in the world, but it's all over the world. People are afraid, I feel. And they're acting accordingly, dog. Generally speaking, reactionary movements come from a response to a rebuttal to ignorance. But more directly, the ignorance here being is like people are tired of trying to be gaslit into believing that trans women are women and can get pregnant, for instance, right? Or from being told that we're, terrible people for not wanting our children to be exposed to that kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? And because of that, the ignorance response is to just complete 180, the reactionary, into whatever it is that's going to stop that from happening, right? That being the assault on Christian conservative values that this country is allegedly built on. But another thing that directly leads to these reactionary movements is the ability to capitalize off the fear that people fear, right? The fear that people feel, rather. The fear of the other, the fear of the unknown. And of course, there is no greater unknown than death, right? The fear of what's going to happen to your own actual physical body, which is understandable. Don't get me wrong. What's not understandable, if you ask me, is the impulse to react on that fear. Because if you're going to allow people to control you and manipulate you based off your emotions alone, I'm sorry to say it, but you are a weak, pathetic person. I'm not sorry to say it. I'll say it with pride, right? That's day one, introduction to philosophy, appeal to emotion shit. You should be able to think critically and rationalize why people are trying to capitalize on your fear in the first place, right? And 9 times out of 10, the reason why is because the people who are doing so know that fear is such a powerful, such a primal emotion that most people will probably act irrationally in order to try to do away with the fear, which is how you get right-wing, authoritative dictators, essentially. Okay. Again, the philosophy, like for real, it always, for me personally, it always saves me, which is one of the reasons why I really did want to start this podcast initially. Like there's a few reasons, no doubt, as I mentioned before in the past, students, asking like, hey, what happens after this? You got more classes? You know what I mean? The desire to, obviously profit off of it, in whatever respect. But also the desire to spread the philosophy, bro. Like I really do love the philosophy, and I really do sincerely believe that it can be a saving grace to the world. And this is just one example. For me personally, the philosophy always saves me because I am human, just like you. Or maybe. I don't know if you're actually a human. Maybe I'm not a human, right? Little 1970s sci-fi movie twist. Whatever the case is though, like the philosophy, it really does, help put me at ease whenever I feel very scared, essentially, with what's happening. And this is no exception, dog. And in this particular sense, the philosophy was the logical fallacies. Whenever I do feel like the fear stimulus, like, oh shit, creeping in to make a decision, I just pause and reflect on why is this person trying to make me feel this way and to what purpose? And usually that'll help dissipate it, right? as far as the world that we're living in currently. I went back and I started rereading this trilogy, The Horror of Philosophy by Eugene Thacker. And right off the first page of the first book, like it just instantly put me at ease, dog. Right? In the preface, like literally the very first chapter, the very first paragraph rather of the first page, he jumps right in, Thacker does, by stating that the world is increasingly unthinkable. A world of planetary disasters, emerging pandemics, tectonic shifts, strange weather, oil-drenched seascapes, and the furtive, rather, always looming threat of extinction, right? In spite of our daily concerns, wants, and desires, it is increasingly difficult to comprehend the world in which we live and which we are a part of. It's the first words from the first page, dog. That's what he's saying right there. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, for me personally, it just helped perfectly summarize the current vibe of our times, that I feel at least, which would in turn refute, I suppose, my initial point about how this time seems particularly unique, right? And that is because the fact of the matter is, as terrifying as right now currently seems, we've inherited a history, as I just talked about, with the pearl, with the necklace, right? And the fact is, dog, that history is part of existence, which in and of itself is horrifying, bro. Existence is horrifying. Hence the horror of philosophy, right? And what's even more pressing and horrifying is the definitive lack of an answer, okay? This is an enormous psychological weight that some people simply carry better than others, dog. And that not a single one of us is liberated from. I was watching this video the other day, dog. It randomly popped up on my Insta, probably during the time when Insta had that famous glitch where all the gore videos were being shown, right? But it was a video of some dude who just like this usual suspect, a European American, right? It was an elderly one. He was like in his 40s or 50s maybe. Just rolled up to a laundromat and started blasting people for like no reason at all whatsoever. Other than bro just lost it. Like he just a flip switched. You know what I mean? And because of that, he felt the need to go murder people indiscriminately in a mass shooting. That's what I'm talking about, dog. Most people don't do that, right? Because some of us carry the psychological weight a lot better than others. But some people, they just simply can't, bro. And sometimes they just flip a switch and fucking snap, right? And this is what I feel currently is really, really, really being pressed to the limit right now. Right? To continue along on that point that I was making earlier about Latinx dorks, they themselves, they're just a microcosm of this very fact, bro. It don't matter, again, if you're a social justice warrior, fucking liberal, okay, smiling in the wake of encroaching fascism, whether you're a devout Christian or a resolute atheist, we are all clinging, dog, desperately right now to a story that gives us a sense of comfort in the face of this unrelenting dread of existence, bro. And the more strange reality is getting, the more we're going to hunker down into these beliefs in a desperate attempt to make sense of what's happening. Because as you may or may not have heard before, for me at least, right? The truth about stories is they are all we are, right? And again, this is what straight up makes philosophy so insufferable for so many people, bro. It's by default, okay? Philosophy is like this unrelenting force that's constantly seeking to uncover many of the pre-established notions that we have to make sense of the world that we're living in. And in many instances, it does so by flipping over the ideas and beliefs that give people relief, right? From the horror of existence by examining, philosophy just comes in and starts asking questions, dog, to examine the merits of these beliefs that give people comfort in the first place, right? And tries to determine whether we are even rational to have them in the first place, okay? And, yeah, that's, it's annoying. That's the Socratic gadfly example. You know what I'm saying? And, there's this strange balance though, bro, because at the same time, like, philosophy is doing this, but it's simultaneously a torch in the dark that helps us arrive at further justified answers to the terrors of existence that, can help us be at ease on this slippery earth So it's like, it's attacking you, but in many instances, rightfully so. But to say that is weird because now you're presuming that your ideas are better than someone else's, or that you have the rights to take someone from the comfort of the comfortable grip that they have on reality. Like it's a lot, man. Right? Whatever the case, Thacker goes on to tell us that arguably one of the greatest challenges that philosophy faces today lies in comprehending the world in which we live as both a human and non-human world, okay? And moreover, of comprehending this politically, bro. So what he means by this is he's telling us that, on the one hand, we're increasingly more and more aware of the world in which we live in as a non-human world, right? That is a world that is outside of our desires. Like the example that I gave to my class recently was of the tsunami that hit in Indonesia, I believe it was. It was like 220,000 people were killed instantly, bro. That's a lot of people, man. And it is complete, just random act of nature. You know what I mean? And that's horrifying. To me, I live in a desert, bro, and I'm terrified of that because it's just like the world our home is so unpredictable that from one moment to the next, it could literally just kill you en masse. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by we're becoming more aware of the fact that, we like to think of ourselves as being the ones who run this bitch, but we're not. We're just like ants on an anthill, bro. And the earth completely oblivious to our desires. And once you get outside of the earth to the planetary cosmic scheme of things, like fucking forget about it. That's the real horror right there, right? Which is what we're going to talk about here with the mist shortly. But, yeah, dog. So on the one hand, we're coming, face to face with this through things like natural disaster, climate change, energy crises. And, the continued progressive extinction of species worldwide. And on the other hand, all of these effects we understand to be linked directly and indirectly, again, through our actions, whether you choose to act upon them or not. Our actions have an impact collectively to us. This is us. All of this is a direct result, directly and indirectly, to us living here, right? Like humans are directly impacting climate change, which in turn leads to climate disasters, right? So it's like, or man-made energy disasters, you know what I'm saying? Man-made disasters. So we have like this weird balance where, it's a contradiction that's built into this, where on the one hand, we understand where, the world can give a fuck about our existence. But on the other hand, we directly impact the outcome of the earth too, right? And there's this, like a weird contradiction, Eugene Thacker tells us, that is built into this challenge. And that is that we just cannot help but think of the world as a human world by virtue of the fact that, we are the humans on here thinking of it. So we're like trying to make sense essentially of this world that we're living in, this world that seems to be hostile to our existence in the first place. Okay. And the only way that we can do so, of course, is as humans, because we're the humans who are thinking about it, right? So he reminds us then that this dilemma, it's not necessarily new. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where like, it seems as though this is terrifying, but the fact of the matter is, bro, people have lived through far more terrifying epochs than what it is that we're currently going through. The only thing that's different about the one that we're currently in right now is that we are the ones currently in it, going through it right now. Like that's the only thing different. You know what I'm saying? And philosophy is this is why I stated earlier that philosophy gives reprieve, is because what we're experiencing right now, philosophy, it's got answers for it, dog. Right? Today, what we're going through, Thacker tells us, people call it correlationism, accelerationism, or atmospheric politics, and a variety of other terms. But at the core, remember the shared human essence, they're seeking to address the same problem. And that is whether it's being in the world, the dichotomy between active and passive nihilism, the limits of human thought, or in the antinomies of reason through Kant, right? Whatever, like, there's all one long series of events trying to make sense of this fucking strange experience that we have as human beings called life, right? And when this experience that we don't even know what it is in the first place, it starts to, cataclysmically manifest itself in the form of disasters, what do we do? You know what I mean? Well, we do what humans have always done, and that is try to interpret and give meaning to it. Always. That's what we've always done. We're constantly trying to interpret what's happening in this world in an effort to give meaning and purpose to it all. Now, this right here, this is just 2 pages, dog, of a 3-volume series of books by Eugene Thacker. I've got other podcasts on them if you want to go check those out. I plan on doing more because even those podcasts are just like on a couple of chapters. Or I would highly encourage you to read the books if you're interested because they're phenomenal. They're amazing. One of my absolute favorite trilogies ever written by far, right? But for now, I want to simply state that, again, in going back to the mist and by extension, everything that's currently happening in our current political climate, we as pattern-seeking creatures who crave meaning and stability, right? This is what we do, bro, right? So again, while it's easy to fall back on the, hysterics of the doomsayers and black pillars who are convinced that we're living through the end times, it's perhaps more important to remind ourselves that literally every human in every preceding epoch has always felt the exact same way that we currently feel. And many of them actually did experience cataclysm, bro. Like outright at the complete end of the world, complete annihilation, right? And that despite that, life still kept rocking and rolling, bro, without so much as a concern for their suffering, because that's what it does. That's what it does. And honestly, bro, we're not going to be an exception because we're straight up not the center of the world, let alone the universe. We're merely rather an extension of both. And the idea here then is that rather than drown in the all too human misery that this understanding generates within us, it's likely best instead to learn, as I've been stating this entire time, to swim through the waters of life and to polish ourselves to the best that we can be while we are here capable of doing so, right? Now, in the mist, it's monsters, right? Again, I'm not going to ruin it. I encourage you to go watch it so we can have that in common, right? But there's like one scene in particular, like it's like the culmination of the movie. So I won't get too deeply into it, but they revert to Christianity and they start trying to make sense of what's happening in terms of Christianity, right? They're like, this is happening because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, maybe, right? Or maybe that's just you trying to make sense of it currently right now, right? Whatever the case is, we understand this to be at once a philosophical problem, a political problem, and a cultural problem. And it's best understood, again, through this philosophy, this horror of philosophy, not as, or rather as, is best understood, through horror, not as a experience of fear, as the human experience of fear in this particular sense, but rather as an enigmatic thought of the unknown. That's what the horror is in philosophy, right? Another one of the things that it is. So in this sense, then it would be like horror as a safety net, for instance, that is the story that we've comforted ourselves with, right? That is being pushed to its absolute limit, possibly even shredded, and then frantically pieced back together to make sense of that which gave us comfort in the first place. You know what I'm saying? So when it's initially revealed that they are in fact under attack, they have a hard time coming to terms with it because, is it angels? Is it demons? What is it? That Christianity being pushed to its limits, right? And then they reveal itself to be fucking monsters instead, shatters their complete understanding of the fabric of reality. But then they piece it back together through Christianity and said, no, this is just like a test and it's in the Bible. It's, the 7 locusts and all that kind of shit, right? That's kind of what that implies here. We see it constantly with people who are, living through this current political, upheaval, who are scrambling from all different angles to make sense of their particular story, whether it's white Christian nationalism, whether it's Judaism, whether it's Islam, whether it's atheism, whether it's the Republicans, whether it's the Democrats. You have people from all walks of life who follow all sorts of different stories that they utilize as frameworks to make sense of reality and help them sleep comfortably at night, who are scrambling to make sense of what's currently happening because it's so novel for us that it doesn't fit within the framework of the stories that we have so far. So we're trying to just like piecemealing them together in order to, create this story that's going to give us a sense of comfort and making sense rather of what's currently unfolding. And that's a lot of I think at least, a lot of the panic that we see unfolding currently right now. one of the things that I really like about these books, the Horror of Philosophy series, is that he gives us a lot of useful frameworks for understanding, much of what it is that we're dealing with through the lens of the horror genre, right? And one of my favorite ones is, one that, like, they're all my favorite. I can't just single one out. But for this particular example, he talks to us about mists and oozes, right? Which obviously the mist, I'm going to go towards the mist, right? But in more directly, let me be more clear here. I dropped a podcast a long time ago, years ago, about how the attacks on the Twin Towers were like an act of ritual sacrifice, and that if you watch the video of the dust, right, of the Twin Towers overtaking New York City, that was very metaphoric for the darkness that was soon to consume America, and that the actions that occurred after that was quite literally the summoning of a demon, but it wasn't like a demon in the sense that we're used to in Hollywood form, like The Exorcist, but rather a demon in the form of the Patriot Act, which served to strip away much of the joy in life. Again, if you were alive in the 1990s, you remember how happy life was. And you remember how dark shit got after the 9/11 attacks and how progressively darker it's gotten since, dog. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. When, why the mist, for example, is another metaphor for explaining this. Wouldn't apply to the Twin Tower attacks because that wasn't mist, but it does apply to a lot of what's currently happening right now, right? In the sense that you have, so he tells us, let me just lay the foundation here. You have, these things that occur in life, like mists and oozes, just to go with those examples. And they generally work for a variety of reasons. And one of the reasons would be to conceal rather the fantastic. You know what I'm saying? So, and what makes them different, just to be clear, is that unlike magic circles, like the Large Hadron Colliders over there in fucking Switzerland, these oozes and mists, they're not relegated to particular locations, and they're not necessarily man-made. They're just like facets of reality, like just facets of the world that we live in that allow for things to, seep through in some instances, right? I say in some instances because I'm about to talk conspiracy theories, and it's going to be about mists. So man-made mists, but that's the reason why I say it that way. But before I get there, I just wanted to finish up with, the philosophical examination of the movie The Mist. And that's what's happening here, right? So we have two parts that Thacker gives us, of which magic and the fantastic emerge. The first of which being a magic circle, and the second of which being magic places, which is where things like the mists and the ooze come from, right? And these magic sites themselves, unlike magic circles that are man-made and summon particular entities, these magic sites, they're completely ambivalent to human interference. It is, as Thacker tells us, a place where the hiddenness of the world presents itself. It is a magic site, right, where the now anonymous, unhuman intrusion of the non-human world introduces itself. That's what's going on in the Mist, right? They have that government project on filling up in the mountains, and it's not because they're opening a portal, for instance, as they were in Stranger Things, but just because those mountains are particularly special, and this is why, right? It's because in this magic site where the anonymous, unhuman intrusion of the non-human world is introducing itself. Thacker tells us, if the magic circle is the human world looking out and confronting the unhuman world, then the magic site is that hidden world looking directly back at us. He concludes by telling us that it's no surprise then that if the magic circle reveals vaguely anthropoid creatures like demons, ghosts, and the dead, that the magic site creeps forth. I love the language that he uses, right? It creeps forth with entities that are neither animate nor inanimate, neither organic or inorganic, neither material nor ideal. Whatever the case, these mists themselves evoke many things, and they come in many forms, whether it be drizzling rain, a dense fog, or my personal favorite currently, strange clouds which leads us into the conspiratorial element of this podcast briefly, which is all the strange fogs that have been emerging throughout the United States recently, dog. It's funny how still people, refuse to acknowledge the quote unquote conspiracies, right? And they try to dismiss them as, shallow fabrications. But it's so just not fair or true, dog. Like they just try to dismiss it as conspiratorial, when in reality, that really to me is just a euphemism for truth that we are not being told about, dog. Right? Because, for a variety of reasons. And one is that even if you were to tell people, they just wouldn't believe you. And that is because this truth is so fucking outlandish, dog, that literally their grasp on reality would be completely upended, as I just mentioned earlier, if you do so, right? So for instance, like you could tell people the United States government is actively engaging in warfare against its citizens by chemical warfare on its citizens through things like cloud seeding. And they're going to look at you and be like, oh my God, this fucking tinfoil hat nutter. And it's like, no, dude, I'm telling you the truth. Just look up patent US 1338343A, otherwise known as the Weisverdi patent, which was a patent in the 1920s, dog, 100 years ago, for a process and apparatus that was meant to introduce intense artificial clouds, fogs, and or mists. There's no need for me personally to get into the scientifics of the process because I'm not a scientist and I'm not going to explain it to you fairly. But if you're interested, look up the patent. You can find it for yourself. But the basic idea is, yeah, dog, the United States government is in fact working with fogs and mists in order to experiment on the United States population. And, they say it's in the interest of national security, but there's plenty of examples where, no, dude, like you actually harmed American citizens by doing this, whether it was Operation Sea Spray, which took place in, San Francisco, where they were trying to measure how susceptible a large scale American city would be to a biological attack. So they fucking sprayed the entire Bay Area with Serratia marcescens, which was a bacteria that they claimed wasn't toxic at the time, until it turned out that it was toxic when it was revealed fucking 15 years later, right? Or whether it's what they did in St. Louis, where they sprayed the populations there over 8 square miles of the city with, chemicals as well, where they were experimenting on them just to see how the city would react in the case of a potential attack. They say a potential attack. That was an attack, bro. So yeah, I'm going to keep the conspiratorial element of this one short because this bitch is long enough already. But if you're interested, that's just the reason why I mentioned it in the first place, is because all these random, fog attacks unfolding across the United States of America. Like this is the first initial thing that I thought about. Right. And, again, it's easy to be conspiratorial about it, and understandably so, because people are just trying to make sense of it, dog, from the fear inherent with being a human. And, understandably so, you're living your life one day with no fog or mist ever in your area. And the next day there's this dense fog just rolling in and people are fucking getting sick left and right. You know what I mean? And while it's easy, trust me, dog, as someone who believes in it, who, loves the fantastic, I would love to believe that it's something like, the mist unfolding. But chances are it's 9 times out of 10, the United States government, dog, which realistically at this point should be understood as the bourgeoisie engaging through the United States government in class warfare against the rest of us. Speaking of class war, we will end this episode almost done with the essay Repressive Tolerance by Marcuse. I'll finish with it in the next episode. I'm going to keep this one brief because these last couple of pages, so I'm going to go from page 7 to about page 11 to 12ish. And, it's really just set up at this point for the end of the article, right? So picking up where I left off, I'm midway, from the last episode, through page 7, where Marcuse is talking about the role of objectivity. And I don't know, man, me personally, I'm biased, of course, because I like Marcuse, but, I really think he does a great job of demonstrating, in my opinion, how what is perceived as, objectivity is really just the illusion of objectiveness for, again, given the role that the media industry plays in shaping our understanding, we're going to unconsciously always ally ourselves with the side that they have determined is correct. And then by extension, falsely assume that the simulated feeling that we get for doing so, the quote unquote truth buzz, if you will, is somehow unrequited truth, right? That is undeniable. And it's not, and to be fair, that's not just because of the culture industry. That's also because of public school. You know, the propaganda starts as early as the moment we step into kindergarten. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Like that's when it starts right there, right? First day of kindergarten, where we're made to worship the state, essentially. Doesn't matter whether it's the state of America, the Canada, Mexico, like we're worshiping the state, essentially, right? And that's what he's talking about here is that we're programmed with these ideas from a young age rather, and throughout our entire lives continuously, unconsciously. So, much so to the degree that whenever we're presented with a seeming a choice, that we're always going to choose the one that they've programmed us with. And we're not even going to be aware of this. And what's going to happen is that because of our biases towards this, we're going to assume that it's correct because it makes us feel some type of way and that we're going to associate that feeling with truth. But that's not objectivity. That's clearly biased, right? And that's kind of where he's picking up here with this essay. He gives us the example of the FBI being laid out, like a pro and con about the FBI being laid out on a magazine spread, where on one side, one page you have the pros, and on the other side, the page you have the cons right next to each other. And he tells us that while this may appear prima facie to be objective and unbiased, it's actually deeply biased given the amount of propaganda, again, that we've been bombarded with just by virtue of being Americans. And that because of that, because we're unaware of this fact, we're automatically going to assume that the pro FBI panel to be correct, not because it is, I got to emphasize that, but rather because we just believe it to be true as it stimulates the feeling of truth, again, quote unquote, that was implanted in us by the media conglomerates, the public schools, and a variety of other propaganda that we absorb unconsciously, which has, in this particular case, been devised to make us favor the police state. Now, the same is true with the news reporters, he tells us, and like the tone that they use when they're describing events. For instance, when they're reporting on crimes against humanity in the same unemotional manner that they do like the weather or the stock market. It's, he tells us this is spurious in nature, bro. And the reason why is because genocide, it should inspire the highest form of human emotion capable. And it's absurd to report it in any other manner than that. Like, you should be very concerned about this. And when you're reporting it as, inconsequentially and passively as you're reporting the stock market or the weather, you're minimizing and outright absolving the prevailing tolerance of suppression. Like, you're saying, like, this is okay. What's happening here is okay, because just the same way as that the weather is unpredictable and, unnatural, or rather a natural result of atmospheric phenomena, this genocide here is the same exact way, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? So by reporting it in the same way, you're absolving the people who very clearly are committing it and very clearly can be held accountable for doing so. You know what I mean? So that's what he means when he's saying is like you're absolving the prevailing tolerance or suppression. He tells us that if tolerance has anything to do with truth, and if truth is more than a matter of logic and science, then this kind of objectivity, he tells us, is false, and that intolerance is inhuman. Furthermore, he's going to argue that the only way to undo this is by completely fracturing this world, indigenize and decolonize, homie, and creating a new one that is not, by default, built on a foundation of purposeful indoctrination. He's going hard, bro. Like, he's really going. And I got to emphasize, this was in the 1960s, okay? 1960s, early 1970s. And he's just laying into the foundations of the American public school system in general, but society, Western society as a whole. And in this particular instance, it's why you always hear people like myself who state a better world is possible. This is where it's coming from, not this one particular essay in general, but this whole just general vibe of critical theorists being people who are examining, the future and past potentialities of the world and looking at the current one and saying, we're better than this. We can do better than this. He tells us, democracy is a form of government which fits very different types of societies. This holds true even for a democracy with universal suffrage and equality before the law. And the human costs of democracy are always and everywhere those exacted by the society whose government it is. Their range extends all the way from normal exploitation, poverty, and insecurity to the victims of wars, police actions, military, and in which the society is engaged. And not only do the victims, or rather military aid, in which the society is engaged, and not only to the victims within its own frontiers. These considerations can never justify. 1 second. My computer's acting so slow. I apologize. These considerations can never justify the exacting of different sacrifices and different victims on behalf of a future better society. But they do allow weighing the costs involved in the perpetuation of an existing society against the risk of promoting alternatives, which, after a reasonable chance of pacification and liberation, or rather, which offer a reasonable chance of pacification and liberation. He goes on to tell us, surely no government can be expected to foster its own subversion, but in a democracy, such a right is vested in the people, i.e. the majority of the people. This means that the way should not be blocked on which a subversive majority can develop. And if they are blocked by organized repression and indoctrination, their reopening may require apparently undemocratic means. This is just a very fancy philosophical way of saying, by default, the moment that you take away people's rights to choose the way their society is structured by purposely miseducating them, you no longer live in a democracy. You live in a tyranny, okay? And more importantly, that if you want to really live in an actual real democracy, you have to give the people the rights to be able to change their society in order to fashion it in the way that they deem necessary, okay, or fit. And if you don't, well, not only are you not living in a democracy, but more importantly, it's going to give rise to ways in which they're going to seek to instill a democratic society through quote unquote undemocratic means, and that they should be allowed to do so, moreover, right? This is why he mentioned earlier about how no government should be expected to, foster its own, subversive and, its own downfall. But at the same time, democracy is the name of the game. It's what you kind of have to do, right? Anyways, he goes on to continue that the people who are seeking to stop this, they would include the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements which promote aggressive policies, armament, chauvinism, discrimination on the grounds of race and religion, or which oppose the extension of public services, social security, medical care, etc. Moreover, the restoration of freedom of thought may necessitate new and rigid restrictions on teaching and practices in the educational institutions, which, by their very methods and concepts, serve to enclose the mind within the established universe of discourse and behavior, thereby precluding a priori a rational evaluation of alternatives. I mean, dude, I can't emphasize this enough. This shit was written 60 years ago, and he's talking about exactly what's happening now with everything from public schools that are purposely miseducating people and telling us even now at the collegiate level what we can and trying to, especially, but now codified into law, what we can and can't discuss in terms of shit like DEI, but also like the restructuring of freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly, as we're seeing with the Palestinian student that I was mentioning earlier from Columbia University, and increased militarization of people and the willingness on behalf of alleged American patriots to justify and support this, to exert the force of the American government in order to ensure that dissidence doesn't occur. Like, bro, that is deeply undemocratic and deeply tyrannical. And the fact that you're celebrating it just because Trump is in office is crazy, bro. It's crazy, right? So yeah, he continues to tell us, and to the degree to which freedom of thought involves the struggle against inhumanity, Restoration of such freedom would also imply intolerance towards scientific research in the interest of deadly deterrence of abnormal human endurance under inhuman conditions. I shall presently discuss the question as to who is to decide on the distinction between liberating and repressive, human and inhuman teachings and practices. And as I have already suggested, that this distinction is not a matter of value preference, but of rational criteria. Okay. So that's the part that I really wanted to read to you verbatim because of how important I personally feel that it is towards the current political climate. He's setting up this argument, which he's going to pick up with on page 10, where he's going to tell us that, in discussing the nature of violence and the role that it plays in all societies, whether they be democratic or otherwise, we're going to really have to ask ourselves how democratic of a society that we're really living in, regardless of how comfortable doing so may make us feel. And it's here where Marcuse tells us that the only authentic alternative and negation to any form of dictatorship, democracy included, is a society in which the people, the quote unquote people, have become have become autonomous individuals freed from both the repressive requirements of a struggle for existence in the interests of domination, and as such, human beings choosing to govern their own lives. This is deeply, deeply anarchistic philosophy here, bro. We do not need a government to tell us what to do. Furthermore, the only true liberation that can be had, he's telling us, is the kind that comes when you have rational peoples acting out of their own rational capacities, free of the influence of any form of external control, government included, right? This is not new to Marcuse. The Western philosophical tradition is rife with this, right? It's the spirit of enlightenment, if you will. The dare to know that Kant is talking about, where human beings with our cognitive capacities can literally understand and map the cosmos. The very fabric of reality is possible for us to grasp because of our rational capabilities, but only if you're willing to exercise them. You know what I'm saying? And that in this particular sense, as in the case with Kant in his article, I believe it's called Sapere Aude. I don't know. I don't speak Latin, right? It's Sapere Aude, something like that. Aude, right? But that's the central gist here. Dare to know, right? This is, again, the culmination of, the central point of this section on repressive tolerance. But of this episode as well, dog, these humanistic values, essentially in the sense that, the onus is on us as individuals with these rational cognizing abilities and the responsibility that we bear in creating the world that we desire. Again, I'll pick on the Latinx dorks, right? The social warriors, the social justice warriors, because they deserve it. But the same is true, rather, of any person that relies on an external entity to validate their existence and carry the burden of being a human for them, right? In exchange for the comfort of a story that brings them peace. Well, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, you're all NPC social justice warrior dorks in my eyes, honestly. And it's because you require, white Christian nationalism. You require a story, the comfort of a story, to make sense of this reality for you. And you can easily say, like, you have a story too, bro. It's the indigenous one. Yeah, but I'm also aware of the individual responsibility that I play in making the world a better place. You are content with allowing the government to act through your consent, whether you voted or not, but you still gave consent, right? To bring about the fucking increasingly encroaching techno-feudal dystopic future that we're, slowly marching into. And speaking of the onus, like, this shit's not easy, dog. I'm not fucking sitting here and pretending like it's gonna be easy or that it is easy. It requires us literally to learn how to swim, right? Through life and become autonomous individuals. It requires an enormous amount of strength on our behalf to do so, right? But that's how we become the polished gems that will be a part of the grander necklace of society, homie. This, it requires a complete and utter retransformation of values that is only possible through indigenizing. I'm convinced, right? Indigenizing, because the Western world, with its alleged rugged individualism, as I've already talked about, they cannot comprehend what all this entails. There's no exit from this world through the Western Christian world, quite simply. The only salvation that they have is death and fucking meeting their maker. That's it. That's the only alternative for them. And that is not sufficient. That is not satisfactory, bro. I'm sorry. I don't want to have to die because a bunch of Christians can't wait to meet their Messiah. I'm sorry. Anyways, more directly, and perhaps more importantly, going back to the section on the Nahuatl ancestral philosophy, this requires work, homie. Straight up, it requires work. We don't got time to be fucking lazy, dog. It's not in our ancestral legacy to be lazy, and it absolutely is not a luxury that we are currently afforded. We gotta break free from this tyranny, not only of, the government, yeah, but more importantly, of public opinion, Marcuse tells us, and its makers in the closed society. That's the only way we're going to be able to do so. And yeah, that is about as good a point as any to wrap this bitch up for today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you did it, I'm surprised you made it this long without doing so, but I'll try again in the next one to bring you something hotter. Until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. On Katimo Mati. Peace.